Hello and welcome to a new year of the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff for the 7th year in a row.
Don't stop. Don't say stuff like that, Jonathan.
The other things that have run 7 seasons.
Don't say this either.
3 different Star Trek spin-offs.
Yeah.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes.
Other things.
We haven't gone as long as the X-Files yet.
No.
Once we've gone longer than the X-Files, that's when we're done.
I
can't do that.
I look forward to, in our 9th year, like, you leave the podcast and it's just me and some rando. And then, like, 10 years later, we come back for a 6-episode revival.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, that's the plan. And then we come back for the 10-episode thing, which this would be way more relevant if I had actually watched the new X-Files season first episode, but I haven't gotten around to it yet.
You excited for that?
Yes, I've heard it's very good. I've heard the first episode is bad, and then the rest of it is good.
Which is probably what we were expecting.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
that's par for the X-Files.
Yes.
Of modern X-Files.
All right. Anyway, I'm Jonathan Lack. You're Sean Chapman. We're here
we
for...
did that part already.
I know. I'm just getting us back to base here. Yeah. New year of the Weekly Stuff Podcast. Maybe we have new listeners. That would be awesome. We are going to talk about so much fun stuff today. Obviously, the marquee thing on this episode is we have to talk about the new Doctor Who episode that aired on Christmas, Twice Upon a Time. Spoiler-free take. It made me cry.
It's amazing.
Yes.
It is a really fantastic episode in a lot of ways.
And it's kind of the last new Doctor Who episode we'll have to talk about for a while.
Yeah,
so
August.
So we will have fun with that. But we've got lots of other stuff to talk about. We've got a big umbrella topic that I'm just calling holiday stories, where we're just going to shoot the shit on what we did over the holidays and review things we saw or did stuff with, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
And we have some news.
Yes,
a little bit.
News. It turns out stuff has happened.
Yeah, not the news in like, we didn't read the Trump book and we're going to review that.
No,
but,
yeah.
It's been a really fun couple of days on Twitter because of that.
It's been, it turns out that when people are like, oh, 2017's over, it's like fresh new start in 2018. It's like, that's not how life works.
No.
It's not different in any way. It is the exact fucking same. It's the same it was at the end of 2016. It's the same as it was for all 2017. It's the fucking same.
I would argue our president has maybe ratcheted up the crazy a little bit for the new year.
Sure.
But no, it's definitely not lower.
Yeah,
we can agree on that. All right. So Sean, you want to just start with some holiday stories? Shoot the shit?
Yeah.
Where do you want to start? Let's start with Christmas. What do you do for Christmas?
Well, that's, I say, for my Christmas vacation.
You've got up a story.
Yeah. It's a big thing that my family decided, because this is something we did last year also, is we've started doing family vacations on Christmas. And last year we went to Bermuda, talked about that on the podcast then. And then this year we went on a cruise, which was an interesting experience for me because I've never done that before. And it was a sort of a cruise where we stopped in sort of 4 locations and then came back. And we went to New Orleans first, which was cool, and then went on that cruise. I don't have like a bunch of like insane, crazy, amazing stories of like what I did on this cruise with my family because I'm not going like partying out at night and stuff like that. But it's weird. Like, cruises are a weird experience of being trapped on a giant boat with like 4,000 fucking people, and then 3 of them happen to be your family. That, like, I love my family, but being on an enclosed space with all of them for 8 days, it gets a bit much. It's sort of a cabin fever phenomena.
Yeah.
Only it's because of everyone else. Like, if I was alone, I would have been totally fine being stuck in that enclosed environment with that many people for 8 days when you're out in the ocean, and especially because we had 2 days where it was just the ocean and you couldn't go anywhere else, that gets trying.
I have never been on a cruise in my adult life, and I don't know when I would be able to. But I did as a 10-year-old for my parents. No, I was 9 and it was their 10th anniversary. That's what it was. So I was a kid. My brother doesn't remember it at all because he was too young, but I do remember it. And it was fun, but being on a cruise as a kid is totally different.
Yeah.
Than
like
being out.
They had an arcade room, and I was kind of sad that like I couldn't, like I could go into the arcade room, but it's like I can't go into the. I'm 25 years old. I can't go into the arcade room, and besides, they didn't have anything good in there. It was like air hockey and a fucking Guitar Hero game, and a Terminator Salvation arcade machine, which is something I didn't know existed.
I see that in like movie theaters and other places. Like when I see arcade cabinets, for some reason that Terminator Salvation arcade game got some kind of traction.
I mean, it's just the only fucking arcade machine that got made in America in the past, like, 15 years.
That's probably
like,
it.
That or the, like, Guitar Hero game.
Yes.
Those are the two new ones. Other than that, you have to hope that you can find a fucking, like, big buck hunter machine that still works. Which they did, if you were worried about the cruise.
I think it's probably easier to find a Terminator Salvation arcade game than it is to find someone who remembers the plot of the movie Terminator Salvation.
Yeah, no. I've luckily have avoided watching that movie, and I avoided playing the game on the ship. I'm sure the game is better than the movie.
Wouldn't be hard.
Yeah.
I don't know how you mess up a Terminator arcade game.
Yeah,
you just have to have a gun and...
Yeah. I mean, I think there was like a Terminator 2 light gun game that was pretty good.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, like don't have any mad stories about the arcade machine in the arcade room, the tiny arcade room on the boat. I do have to talk some smack about the fucking library on that boat. It was bullshit. Apparently they don't know how libraries function because like they have all these different cool rooms on the boat. And I saw it's like, oh, they have a little library. That's cool. I'll go there and see what it is. And at first I was really interested because they had like a decent selection of books. But then my favorite thing was that they had books in a bunch of different languages. Because obviously like people from all over the place are going to go on a cruise that goes down to like, you know, Cozumel and like Honduras and Belize City and all these places. And some of them were Japanese books, and like in Japanese, it's like, oh, that's cool. Like I kind of want to check those out. But it was impossible to find like the tiny, like I think it was literally a 2-hour window in the day that you could actually go and check out books, which was infuriating. Because at first I don't even know what the window is. You have to like get there at the right, you have to be there during that window to find out what the window of time is that you can be there.
That sounds like a challenge in a video game. Like find out when the library's open.
It is. It's because it was like from like 10 to noon or something like that. It was just like, what the like, how do you not understand how libraries work? Like, you can just get a thing that detects if someone's taken the book outside of the fucking library. Libraries have solved this problem like 60 years ago. How has this boat not solved this problem?
I've spent a lot of time at non-nautical libraries recently.
Okay.
And I like our library system in Jefferson County is really nice.
Yes, it is.
And yes, I don't ever have to interact with a human being there. It's the best thing.
It's the most wonderful thing about the world we live in. Yes. All the terrible things that happen that make us hate people. Luckily, we've also developed so many ways in which we don't have to deal with people anymore.
It's really great.
But apparently this cruise fucking didn't get around to figuring out how any of that shit works. So it's like it was like visiting a GameStop or something like that, where all the books are behind like a locked thing that you need someone to go in there with a key to open it up. But it's like, it's a fucking library. So that was annoying. That's criticism point one. We cruised on Norwegian, which was the cruise line. So if you're cruising with Norwegian, no, their library is bullshit. It's like,
I don't know what you were expecting to hear from our podcast in the new year, but a review of the library system on the Norwegian cruise line was probably not in your top 5.
But it's, this is important information.
It is.
I feel like if you are interested about making use of the library, like come prepared, come armed with knowledge that I unfortunately found myself lacking.
Maybe bring your own book.
Yes, I mean I did bring my own literature. But I was just interested in the library and couldn't make use of it. Other than that, like not a lot of stuff. I didn't like do anything super like interesting on the cruise itself in terms of on the boat. But I think the favorite thing I did on the cruise was one of the places we stopped off on was Roatan, which is a small island off the coast of Honduras. And what was cool about that was being able to sort of like take a small tour of the island, and we went to a small, like basically a zoo, but they let you sort of directly interact with the animals. So I got to directly interact with some capuchin monkeys. So there's a picture of a capuchin monkey standing on my head, which is pretty good. I got to hold a sloth, which sloths are really fucking cool. If people don't know how cool sloths are, like look up a documentary about sloths. They're amazing animals.
I think maybe one of your New Year's resolution is you finally put a picture of yourself out on the internet.
No, I've already put up 3 pictures of myself. There's 3, and I think 2018. And so far, we're like, what are we? We're 7 days. Yes, we're 7 days into this year. 2018 needs Sonic Miku watching over the Earth. Like, that's what we need right now as a species, and I cannot, for the sake of my own vanity, abandon my project of just putting that image out into the world, just in my own small way. Like, we need that, Jonathan. We need it so bad.
You're basically the Thomas Pynchon of podcasting. We're never going to know what you look like.
No, this is, like I said, that's what I look like.
He's wearing a Sonic Miku mask right now.
That's just me. It's just me. That's all you need to know. But yeah, that was fun.
Met a sloth, met a monkey. That was cool.
Yes, we've met a couple of monkeys.
That's awesome.
One sloth. That was really cool. We visited some Mayan ruins in Belize City, Belize, and those are very cool.
Nice.
There's not a lot to say about Mayan ruins other than that they're really fucking cool.
Add some like stabbing people in, and you basically played an Assassin's Creed game in real life.
We'll get to that because I have been playing some Assassin's Creed. But then just related to the Mayan ruins this isn't really a story, but more like I'm probably a terrible fucking person to go on vacation to a place like this with, because the last place we stopped off on was a place called Costa Maya in Mexico, which is basically like a tourist trap port, a port that was made entirely for a cruise to stop there, and like a tiny, like it's not really a town, it's more like a little like venue of like a bunch of different like shops and all this bullshit that sort of like sprung up there entirely just to like for tourism. So there's no like authentic history or anything there to engage with, other than we didn't because for various reasons, but partially because we already visited a large Mayan ruin site in Belize. You can take a bus that takes you to a Mayan ruin site that's near Costa Maya, but we didn't want to do that. But what you could see from the deck of the boat that was docked is you could see a giant Mayan ruin replica that was a water park. And there was something about that just really annoyed me, of just thinking about the history of we Western Europeans came over to this fucking country. And, like, the Mayans were this amazing, incredible civilization. And you get that sense when you see the ruins of, like, their incredible sense of architecture and what their culture must have been like. And we came over and we killed all of them, basically, and destroyed their culture. Like, we destroyed their language, you know? And it's one of the weird things about, like, Spanish is, like, learning Spanish to, like, interact with, like, the South American countries is always something where you have to, for me, I keep in mind, like, this is like the only reason they speak Spanish is because the Spanish came over here and killed all these motherfuckers and took over, and that's like it's, you know, a direct result of cultural imperialism, in the same way that English is, than us speaking English here. But there's something about us coming over, destroying this entire civilization, thus creating these ruins in the first place because there's nobody to sort of like keep them up anymore, and so they fall into ruin. And then what we do is, like, 400 years later, we take their, like, sacred temple, which is, like, their largest buildings are these giant sacred temples, like, to their sun god and stuff like that. And we take their sacred temple and we turn it into a fucking water park. And then we go there on a cruise and we go to the water park. And that's, like, the most fucked up thing I can think of.
Was the water park just called Imperialism?
It might as well have been, because it's just... Because just, like, to put it in perspective, it would be like if in 500 years, like, our alien conquerors who destroyed and, like, committed, you know, like, mass genocide and basically wiped out the, like, Americans or something, went and they, like, made a water slide out of, like, the St. Patrick's Basilica or something like that. It's just, like, this giant church, and just made it into a big, like, water attraction for recreation. And it's such a, like... disgusting way to like lens to see humanity that it kind of spoiled to get to the cruise for me.
If future Doctor Who showrunner Chris Chibnall is listening, I have a pitch for season 11 of Doctor Who.
Oh, great.
I think you have to have our new Dr. Jodie Whittaker in a sequel to the classic episode The Aztecs go back to where that was, but in the present day with her new companions, and they find the water park, and it's 4 episodes of her having stern words for everyone at that one. There's no real, like, threat. Yeah. It's just like, what are you doing?
It's and like can you not appreciate history and like your responsibility here?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck are you people doing that like it's just something of the ways that like cultural imperialism and capitalism like consume this history that we've created by destroying these people and turn it into a venue in which you can pay a lot of money to have not a lot of fun at a water park. So I avoided that. Instead,
you're making a bunch of good quotes for Yelp reviews of these places.
Yeah.
I gotta say.
So instead of going to the water park, I took a walk around and I saw an iguana, and that was very cool. He was just chilling out. He was just standing on the sidewalk, minding his own business.
We haven't wiped them out yet.
No, yes, not yet.
We will.
Yeah, but that was my adventure on the cruise. It was having some fun and then confronting the sins of our history.
I did not have to confront the sins of our history on my Christmas break.
Well, that's good for you.
I don't think so. At least not directly. Not more than you normally have to.
Yeah, exactly. Not more than the average sort of like count through your life of encountering the sins of our past.
Yeah, I pretty much just stayed around here. We didn't do anything really as a family this Christmas. I mean, my mom just got remarried, so it's like this whole year has been kind of like with holidays. It's like a recalibration,
right.
And I've liked it because I haven't had to go hang out with any other relatives.
Nice.
The ones I hate. I know some of my relatives listen to this podcast. If you're one of the relatives who listen to this podcast, I don't hate you.
Yeah, no. Anybody who listens to this podcast is a good person. By definition, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Anyway, but no. So I just hung out around here. So like a lot of the stuff on my stuff list is I want to like talk about some of the Christmas presents I got because they were cool media things that I can review. So I have a couple of like Blu-rays and stuff to talk about. I have to start though with my favorite Christmas present I got this year, and maybe my favorite Christmas present I've gotten in several years is my mom bought me a Fourth Doctor Who themed bath towel. So it's a towel and it's colored like the Fourth Doctor's scarf.
Oh God.
And I have to say, every day is so much more fun when I have that to look forward to in the morning that, you have to take a shower. But I get to, come out of the shower and I have a Fourth Doctor bath towel.
Are you fucking 8 years old, Jonathan?
I didn't ask for this, to be clear. I didn't mention any of this.
I never asked for this.
She just knows I like Doctor Who, and I guess saw it on Amazon. Actually, you know what? Her story was even better. She said she wanted to get me, like, one of the replica, like, Fourth Doctor scarves.
Right. Those are expensive.
Yeah, she said that was too expensive, so she got me the Fourth Doctor bath towel. But I have to say, like...
I feel really nice. Bad that I just totally revealed that I have looked up Fourth Doctor scarves before because I know that they are very expensive.
I found one that was fairly cheap, and I did order it recently with a gift card I got for Christmas as well. So I can review that maybe next week on the podcast.
Fantastic.
But
Jonathan's scarf review corner.
No,
I'm looking forward to
it. And
I
probably wouldn't have ever looked for it if it weren't for the bath towel. But it's just like, I gotta lean into this now.
Yeah,
it's great.
It's who you are.
We'll talk about my adventures with my continuing Doctor Who watchings later. Maybe when we'll do a Doctor Who corner later in the episode, obviously. Yeah. But I am pretty obsessed with Tom Baker at this moment.
Yes,
so
you are where I was like 8 years ago now.
It's love.
Yeah.
It's true love. Anyway, so that was cool. I just like that's a Christmas present that I did not expect and has brought me a lot of joy.
Great.
So I just want to say, thank you.
I'm very happy for you, Jonathan.
Yeah. Let's see. I also got the Art of Persona 5 book.
Cool.
Have you seen this yet?
No, I haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah. My mom. I think that was also something I had on my Christmas list, and it's really cool. It's like 500 pages long.
Jesus.
It's enormous. It's the biggest art book I've ever seen for like one thing. Like I've seen art books that size for like a series. Like there was this Legend of Zelda art book that came out last year, and it's about that big, but that's for a 30-year franchise.
Right.
This is just for Persona 5, and it's a fucking phone book of art. It has, for all of the main party characters, 30 pages on that character.
Jesus.
With like all the concept art, every asset that is in every hand-drawn asset in the game. So every like thing that they have in, so like when they're talking in dialogue boxes, everything when like they have a victory move on screen, like their finish move, like Morgana's mission accomplished thing. There's a big version of that. And then there are, the rest of the book is like all the other characters, and every character gets at least 2 pages. And Persona 5, if you don't know, has a lot of characters.
Yeah.
So it is an enormous art book. I have not by any means delved into it in full yet, because it's an undertaking to look at this thing. But it is really, really neat, and I can't recommend it enough, because it's not like they overpriced it. It's like a $20 art book. And I don't really understand the economics of it, because it looks expensive. But it was apparently pretty cheap. It's very neat. Like, you have the Persona 3 and 4 ones.
Yeah, they're the official design works.
And they're these little thin...
Yeah.
They're like 120... They're great, but they're like these little thin books, which you would kind of expect normally for a single game.
Yeah.
But, like, they're like, fuck, we made a lot of art for Persona 5. We're damn well going to put it all in here. That art book got delayed a bunch in English, and you can tell why, too. Because it's an art book. It's not text-heavy. But if there's a little bit of text on every page and there's 500 pages,
right,
that's still a lot of work. And, you know, I've read through some. There's a lot of comments from Shigenori Soejima, the character designer, and that's all very cool. So,
nice. Anyway,
can't recommend that highly enough.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely get that at some point soon.
And then I have 2 quick Blu-ray reviews I have to make.
Okay.
Because these were other... One of these was something my family got me for Christmas. And one of these was something I got myself for Christmas.
I wonder if we'll be able to figure out which one is which.
You're going to have to guess because one is Twin Peaks and one is Doctor Who.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No. Okay. I just have to show you this, Sean. I brought it with me. The Twin Peaks The Return box set. Describe what you're seeing, Sean. It's...
Yeah, so the front of the cover is the beautiful and immaculate Kyle MacLachlan. But of course, he plays multiple different characters over the course of the new Twin Peaks. And so they have both bad Mr. C. Cooper and they have, like, classic Dale Cooper in the Red Room, like, fused together with a jagged line to open up the case. You have to separate them.
So you open up the case and separate them, and what's underneath?
Dougie!
Dougie's underneath! This is the greatest packaging ever!
They fucking get it.
They fucking get it. I have not watched this whole Blu-ray set yet because I need to prepare myself.
Right, yeah.
But I have definitely, looked at some of the different discs and spot checked it. One, the packaging is just amazing. If you are a fan of Twin Peaks or of physical media, get it. It's really cool. Yeah. And they've said this is limited packaging, so I assume they're going to, like, for the next printing, do this as a regular Blu-ray case, which will still be worth it, but not as cool.
Right.
But it's very neat. You pull it out, and then the actual case is like a big Red Room thing that folds out with all the discs. They've done a really nice job. They split the entire 18-part series over 8 discs, so they gave it lots of room to breathe, which is nice. A lot of Blu-rays today, they'll throw like 7 hours on one disc.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you're not doing a good job with that. So anyway, it's very cool. They've stretched it all out. They've, like episodes 1 and 2 aired combined on Showtime, but have separate versions. Both of those are on here, so you can choose. It's like a very complete archive. And there's bonus features throughout, but the final disc has like a 10-hour documentary on thoroughly on the making of this thing that David Lynch has never allowed this much access to his set, and he let a filmmaker come and just document the whole thing. I have not dived into that yet, but it sounds very exciting. And I did, look at a couple of the episodes, like just some scenes I liked and stuff. And the uptick in video quality from like Showtime streaming to this is immense. It almost looks like a different show. Like, you don't realize how good the digital photography was until you see it here. It looks like a full theatrical production. So I'm just really happy they kept up, because like Twin Peaks has always had really nice home video releases. Yeah. And that Blu-ray set that they did a couple years ago for the original series, which was an impetus for making the new one because it sold really well, is one of the best TV box sets ever. And this is too. And like, I'm so used to new media, like stuff made in the 2010s, getting really shitty home video releases. Yeah. Because usually that work is only put into like catalog stuff, like what the Criterion Collection does. And so it's really rare to get a new thing where they've put in the fucking work, and I'm so happy. And you open the case and see Dougie. Yes. And it just makes me happy.
Yeah. And I'm very satisfied that they didn't call it Twin Peaks Season 3.
Yes, that's also good.
There was that weird time where it was like, don't do that. They said they were going to do that. Don't do that. And it just says Twin Peaks Unlimited Event Series. Yes. And that's very good.
Which is the technical title of the series per like Showtime's press releases. So I would have preferred Twin Peaks The Return, but it's close enough.
Yes. Yeah, it is not a frustrating title in any way.
Yes. Again, seasons of TV do not air 26 years apart. Yeah. The X-Files, we can get away with that being season 10 and 11 because it's not 26 years. Yeah. Yeah. Mulder and Scully are not on their deathbed in these new episodes. Yeah. Anyway, all right, so that was cool, but I haven't really watched it yet, but the material. It's Twin Peaks. It's great.
Yes, we've talked a lot about Twin Peaks The Return on this podcast.
The thing I bought for myself for Christmas, because I had to import it from the UK, is the BBC, worldwide division that does the home video releases, put out last month, December, a new version of the unfinished Doctor Who story, Shada. It's the 4th Doctor story from Douglas Adams' season on the show. It was going to be that year's season finale. They didn't finish shooting it because of a strike, which there's a bunch of material on here about that, which is fascinating. And so Shada was never finished, and as a result, it's been a object of a lot of fan intrigue over the years, shall we say. And they did in 1992 a reconstruction where they had all the finished footage, and then Tom Baker, in really eccentric form, narrated like the missing pieces.
Yes, that is the first version of Shada I saw.
Yes, and it's on this Blu-ray, which is cool.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. They also, in 2003, Big Finish did a version where they rewrote it for the 8th Doctor. That is also on here in its animated webcast version.
Yes,
which
so that's kind of like 2 different versions of Shada there.
Yes, already they've done books, they've done lots of Shada stuff, but what they finally did here is kind of taking a cue from what they've been doing over the course of this decade in going back to first and second Doctor stories that are missing and animating the missing portions of them, which recently resulted last year, I think, in Power of the Daleks. They did the whole 6-episode shebang.
Yeah, it was the first Patrick Troughton story.
Yeah, so that was really cool they did that. I guess it did well because they're doing more of these projects. For Shada, they did the same thing where they have animated all the missing pieces. It's a little harder for Shada, though, because they don't even have the audio, obviously.
Yeah, because it's not like the old, like, missing episodes which were destroyed. This was that, like, there was a strike and they literally just didn't finish shooting it.
Yeah, and for many reasons, like John Nathan Turner was the incoming producer. He really wanted to finish it. He tried for years, never could for all sorts of reasons, including Tom Baker left the show, which is hard.
Yeah, that definitely makes it hard to then finish it.
Because it would be hard to just, like, one week you have Peter Davison and then the next week it's Tom Baker. We'd all be okay with it, but it'd be weird. Anyway, so they did that, and it's actually more in-depth than even that. And I'll talk about that in a second, but first I just want to say, the packaging on this thing. I got the Steelbook version, which I have to, if you want to see the Shada Blu-ray thing, get the Steelbook from Amazon UK while it is still in print. It's a limited run thing. It has a bonus 3rd disc that's not in the other versions, and that has the 1992 version and the 2003 Paul McGann version. Otherwise, they're not on here.
Yeah.
But it's really cool. This is the nicest Steelbook I have ever seen. It's got hand-drawn art by the team that did the animation. If you open it up and, like, take out the discs, it's got more hand-drawn art in there.
Nice.
It is just super nice. Comes with a booklet with lots of notes on the thing. But, like, look how cool that is, Sean.
Yeah, no, it's really nice.
It is really nice. And so I was super excited to see this because I love Douglas Adams. I really liked City of Death when we watched that for our Doctor Who bonus podcast in December. And this is his other story from that year. So I was excited to see what they were going to do with this. And so I think it was on Christmas, actually. I watched the Doctor Who Christmas special, and everyone else had gone to bed, and I'm like, I'm going to keep this Doctor Who party going. And I just...
The best thing about the Doctor Who party is that the Doctor Who party never stops. Because there's a lot of Doctor Who to get through.
Yes, there is. If you somehow run out of all the TV show and all the audio dramas, there's still a lot of books, and if you run out of those, there's comics, and if you run out of those...
No one person can grasp all of Doctor Who at once.
No. So anyway, I watched Shada. What they've done is, for the main presentation, it's not presented as 6 episodes. It's done as one edited together, like 2.5-hour movie, which I actually think is probably a good thing to do for it. Because it just makes some of the changes a little more seamless. It allows them to kind of tighten up some pieces between episodes. But they've gone back and taken all the original footage, remastered it. The Blu-ray is really interesting in terms of a video perspective because there's sort of 3 different footage sources. You have the new animation, which is obviously nice and new and high def and everything. You have the location footage, which was shot on 16mm, and they've gone back to the original 16 because it looks beautiful, a lot like that Spearhead from Space Blu-ray that's out there.
Nice.
And then finally there's the studio footage, which was shot on tape, and that can only look so good, although it does look better enough than Doctor Who DVDs that I would be interested in them. Like, they don't need to do every Doctor Who story on Blu-ray. I do think it would be interesting if a couple of, like, the big ones were to get some attention there. But anyway, so it's kind of funny to just watch it and, like, even just between live action stuff, the video quality varies a lot in interesting ways. But anyway, I watched the whole thing in one sitting, which kind of says its own thing, because it's a 6-parter.
Right,
and I loved it. I think it's a great Doctor Who story. It's, it's not one of the absolute best, but it's very creative. It's very Douglas Adams-y, and I am so happy they did this, complete reconstruction of it because some of the best stuff in that story was never shot.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the coolest things is it's not like you get to the animated portions and it's like, oh, these were the bad parts of the script. they didn't shoot it like that. You know,
Yeah,
they don't
right,
shoot
yeah.
scripts preferentially. So, like, there is a part midway through this story where there's this character, the villain has this ship with a computer on it, and it is such a scene from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The Doctor convinces the computer to start taking his instructions by convincing the computer he is dead, and therefore the computer no longer has to view him as an enemy. One of the best things ever, and because they've brought in all the original actors, Tom Baker and Lala Ward and everyone have done the voices, it's not Tom Baker as a person doing those scenes, but it's a good animated facsimile and his wonderful, wonderful voice, which somehow has not changed.
Yeah, it was interesting because his first season of Fourth Doctor Adventures he did for Big Finish, you could feel that he had gotten older.
Yeah.
But then he has, gotten really good at recapturing that voice in a way that's, really scary almost. I don't know how a human being could even do that.
Yeah, I mean, and you can hear the difference, obviously, in part just because recording material is different.
Right, yeah.
But it's much more seamless than you would think. Like, Lala Ward sounds a little more different just because she doesn't have as distinctive a voice as Tom Baker. She's still really good. She totally has Romana down. That's really fun. But anyway, it's really good what they've done. Like I said, I think it's a really fun, good story. It actually is quite a bit like City of Death in a lot of ways because it's the Doctor and Romana are on vacation in another European locale, this time Cambridge. It's a lot of location shooting, a similar kind of pace to it and stuff. Not as good as that story, but still very interesting. And it moves. It's got a lot of cool Time Lord lore in it. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I felt kind of lucky that this was my first time experiencing Shada.
Yeah.
Because it's not just they've animated the missing parts. They've gone back and his name is Mark Ayers, who was a composer for Classic Who during the John Nathan Turner years. They commissioned him to write a full score for the story.
Oh,
so it's now fully scored, and he did it in the style of Classic Who. And I think he particularly did it in the style of Dudley Simpson. It sounds like a Dudley Simpson score, and it's really, really great. And that just kind of ties so much of it together. They've added special effects, and for the special effects in the live action portions, they've been very careful to do it in a way that it looks like something they could have done in 1979 when this was shot. And there is also, if you make it to the end, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful surprise that is one of the best things to happen in Doctor Who this decade. And I won't spoil it, but you'll be excited, Sean.
Okay,
you will love it. It's really cool, and if you want to see this, you're going to have to import it, at least for now, because this is not coming out in the U.S. for some reason until September of 2018.
That's weird.
And even then, it's only on DVD. They're not doing a Blu-ray version. I don't know if they're going to do a digital version as well, but I would import the Blu-ray from the UK. It's relatively easy to order from Amazon UK. The one thing is their shipping services suck. I ordered this before it came out, and it took me till December 23rd to get it. So it took 4 weeks for it to get here. I can order from Amazon Japan, and it comes the next day.
Yeah.
I don't know what Amazon UK is doing, but very, very cool. It's got all the bonus features from the original DVD release of Shada with the 1992 version, plus new bonus features. It's got a full audio commentary by the people who did the animation. I was sad it's not a Tom Baker, Lala Ward audio commentary or something, because those are always fun.
Yeah.
But they did enough work for it. It's fine. So it's very, very cool. I cannot recommend it highly enough. One of the coolest Doctor Who home video releases in years.
Awesome. Yeah. I really hope that they keep on doing stuff like this, because there are so many great old Doctor Who stories that are completely lost that I hope get at least the animated version, because it's going back and watching those reconstructions of photo stills from the set and stuff like that with the audio over it only gets you so far.
Yeah, and I didn't really talk about the animation. It's really nice. It's definitely the best animation I've seen from the team that does these. It's still if you've never seen one of these, put your expectations in check. It's not the best animation in the world. But again, better than watching a series of stills. And this is actually a much harder task because it's all in color.
Yeah.
You've got, I think Tom Baker is a significantly harder Doctor to animate than Patrick Troughton or William Hartnell, just because he's a weirdo. He's got, they cannot do the scarf justice in animation, but they try, But it's very nice. And after the first couple scenes, it's surprisingly not how little it jars when you're watching it. So it's really, really cool.
Awesome.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's some of my that's what I did my Christmas is I consumed some fun media, and I've been watching a lot of Doctor Who, doing some other things. I forgot to do this in our housekeeping part early in the episode. Much of my holiday break was spent pouring through movies for my top 10 list for 2017.
Right.
I'm also part of the Denver Film Critics Society, and we do our awards voting. Our nominations are going to be announced today when this podcast is coming out, January 8th, so might put that on my site. I'm kind of interested to see what we nominate. There's so little consensus this year in all the awards stuff. Like the Golden Globes are tonight, and it's got completely different nominations than everyone else. So I'm kind of curious about that. But it was a great year in movies. Asterisk for the art of film, not the business or the culture of film.
Right, yes.
Which I wrote about in my top 10 list. But I had a lot of fun. I get all the screeners from the studios, which is awesome because it lets me see many more movies than I would otherwise be able to and talk about those for you guys. And I did wind up doing not only a written version, but an audio version of that in the podcast feed. It's a bonus episode, solo Jonathan, but it actually turned out really well. Did you get a chance to listen to that?
No, I haven't. I read your version, but I didn't get a chance to listen to it yet. Because I think that came out while I was on the boat, so
that
I
makes
didn't
sense.
download anything.
Yeah, it's basically me reading the list. I made some alterations, and I added some music. It's a much more produced episode of the Weekly Stuff podcast than you normally hear because it's just me, so I had to find ways to make it interesting. But no, so you can either listen to it or read it, and that's there. I enjoyed writing the top 10 list this year. Very good year for movies. My number one was Lady Bird.
Yes.
Maybe surprises no one. But there are other ones on there that will surprise you, and I could make a second 10 for the year that would be similarly strong. Really cool year for movies. So, I had to leave off. I thought for sure Logan was going to make my top 10 at the end of the year.
Right.
And it didn't quite. And I think Logan is maybe the best superhero movie made since The Dark Knight. So that tells you something about the year in movies.
Yeah,
so.
It's just crazy to think about that Logan came out last year. That feels like that was 5 years ago.
Because it was really early. It was March.
Yeah, it was March. So, yeah.
Well, anyway, so that's some of my stuff. Do you want to transition into talking about maybe some video game things we've been doing?
Yes, because basically what happened was obviously since I was on that cruise, no real video gaming, because I don't have a Switch. I have a Vita, but didn't really have anything that I was in the mood to play. I just read a lot of stuff while on the cruise. It was sort of my main luxury thing I did. So then when I got home, it was okay, now it's time to play the video games is the thing I need to do now because there's lots of video games to be played. So I've played a lot of Hatsune Miku. There's not anything more to say about it. I think I said a lot about it on the top 10 podcast. But yeah, that game's still just fucking a complete and utter joy. It is still, if you are playing Hatsune Miku and you are not going in and fiddling with the costumes and taking fun screenshots, you're playing that game the wrong way. Because it's two amazing video games in one. There's playing the rhythm game, and then there's playing the photojournalist game.
Given the opportunities that are there in the photos, I think it's a civic duty if you own that game to upload funny screenshots.
Yes, yeah. I'm probably going to put up a few on Twitter sometime soon.
I just love you hadn't been on Twitter in months, or at least tweeted. I'm sure you've been on it, but and then you did 5 tweets in a day for your Hatsune Miku gallery.
I had my again. I feel like I need to be a force for positive in the world. No, it's hard. It is very fucking hard to be that on Twitter.
No,
that is something we've learned.
To be clear, this is not a criticism of you. I think you are months without tweeting, and then a day of Hatsune Miku tweets is more positivity than most people put into the world through Twitter.
Yeah. So one thing I was trying to do, I'm not sure if this is entirely. This is definitely possible. It's just I haven't gotten all the way through the list of songs of Hatsune Miku to find all the right areas. But I was playing with the idea of doing my top 10 games list from last year in screenshots representative of each game in Hatsune Miku. I cannot promise that I will be able to do that because some of them are very hard to do, but I do have a brilliant Neo one and I have an amazing Nier Automata one that maybe I'll put out even if I don't finish all 10.
If you get all 10, send those to me so I can make that a page on the site.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to do that.
Because it is a really fun, weird thing to do with that game, but legitimately, if you're playing Hatsune Miku, I highly recommend doing that. Photo modes have been a really big thing in games for the past year or so, and that I don't know if that's technically a photo mode in the same way Assassin's Creed has one, Horizon has one, stuff like that, or Super Mario Odyssey has one, but it is my favorite photo mode in any game I've played so far because I've had by far the most fun because of how just stupid it is. So that's one thing I've been playing. I played a lot of. And then also I started playing Assassin's Creed Origins, of which I'm not like insanely deep into the game, but I've been like very thorough in how I'm playing it. So I'm basically at the end of the Alexandria sort of section of the game, which is relatively near the beginning based on the size of the map, but there's a lot in that game.
There's a lot of that map you don't even go to in the campaign.
But I'm having a lot of fun with Assassin's Creed Origins. I'm really loving that game. I think the story is just fucking awesome. Like especially for an Assassin's Creed game, the story is so far above most Assassin's Creeds, just in terms of like the characters and the likability of the characters, and like the depth of the characters is so far above most Assassin's Creed games. But I also think you can really tell the sort of the influence that The Witcher 3 has started having on the industry based on this game, just in terms of the philosophy in the side quests, is that the side quests get to be interesting, and there's a lot of interesting stories told through the side quests. The side quests don't feel compelled to be like big and over the top in any way. There are lots of side quests in the game that are just like relatively mundane, that ask you to do fairly mundane things. You might stab a couple of people, but they're not like ridiculous and over the top. They find lots of spaces to tell smaller stories about characters in the side quests that I'm having a lot of fun with.
Not only do I think the side quests are the best part of that game, narratively, and sometimes gameplay-wise, I actually think it has a similar feeling to me of The Witcher 3, where thinking back on it, I can't remember sometimes what's a side quest and what was main content.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be with this kind of game.
Yeah, so that's been really awesome. It's just fun, like, cool to see that of, like, The Witcher 3 is one of my favorite games ever, and it's cool to see the influence it's already having on the genre in terms of, like, storytelling and structure and that kind of stuff. It is also, I think, by far the best playing Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
Which is not a huge, like, hurdle to overcome, but it's, like, it's something that I've always been baffled by, like, the game design of Assassin's Creed games in the past of basically every single Ubisoft game made since Splinter Cell Conviction in like 2008 has been, or that might be like 2009 or 2010, but it's been like the exact same sort of like action stealth gameplay that is like you're trying to be stealthy, but you kind of like break into like heavier action and go back into stealth, and you have a lot of gadgets to sort of like maintain that equilibrium and stuff like that. That's been every Ubisoft game for like 10 fucking years. Except for Assassin's Creed. It's been like Splinter Cell, Conviction, and Blacklist is like that. Far Cry 3 and 4 is like that. Their fucking new Ghost Recon game is like that. All the fucking Ubisoft games are exactly that. Like, even Watch Dogs is basically like that in terms of the combat design. And Assassin's Creed, the game that feels like that is, based on the title and like the objective of Assassin's Creed, that seems like that's exactly what that game is supposed to be. And it never was that, because they never could find a way to create like actual stealth mechanics, and it was like weird sort of like pseudo stealth mechanics about blending in and using hiding spots and stuff like that, but never fleshed out in such a way that you felt like you could engage them in this sort of like holistic game mechanic kind of way. They were just like very situational in a way that was never satisfying, and they made little bits of progress over the years. In like Assassin's Creed 4, they had the plantation missions where you could hide in the grass, and sort of like, again, it was like they were stealth mechanics, but they were still weird because like entirely dependent on you going into the grass, and then you were able to be hidden and like would go into like this ducking mode and stuff like that. Finally, with Assassin's Creed Origins, it's been over 10 fucking years with this franchise, they finally put in a fucking ducking button. It's just like, thank you. Holy shit, thank you. You fucking made a stealth game now. It took you 10 years with this franchise. They finally turned it into a stealth game, and that is so like clearing some of those fortresses, especially I'm playing it on the harder difficulties. Clearing some of those fortresses in stealth is so satisfying in the way that like I think the best Ubisoft games have that element. It feels like clearing out an outpost in Far Cry to me, which is a really
very similar to that.
Yeah, and it's just like I really love that kind of gameplay. It's one of the things I really loved about like The Last of Us and Uncharted 4 and Lost Legacy have that kind of thing with Uncharted. I just really like that blend of stealth and action a lot, and I think Ubisoft is typically very good at it. And I'm very happy that finally they've kind of like put some of that into Assassin's Creed, and that feels really good. And then I generally like the combat mechanics. They are much more sort of clear and well defined than the combat mechanics in Assassin's Creed in the past, which always felt like if you just killed everybody in one hit in old Assassin's Creed games, and that was kind of fun, but in a very light way. And then whenever you encountered an enemy that you couldn't kill in one hit, it felt like impossible to understand what you needed to do to actually kill them. And it was like, again, it was something about the game design of the old Assassin's Creeds that's very sort of like murky and not clearly defined. Assassin's Creed Origins, while like that, it doesn't look as slick in terms of the animations and stuff like that as the older Assassin's Creeds. That those fundamentals of the combat design feel like you're actually playing a video game, and there are things you can do, and you can approach different combat encounters in different ways, like by like focusing on parrying or dodging around behind them, or like keeping like an offensive strategy or defensive strategies. And there are different things you can do, different strategies with the different weapons. It feels again like it's maybe a sort of like backhanded compliment, but Assassin's Creed feels like it plays like a video game now.
Yeah, I don't think anything Origins does mechanically is like great, innovative, but it's good. Like it's good and solid, and sometimes more than that. And it is at a baseline like fun and engaging to play. And there were sadly a lot of parts of old Assassin's Creed games that just weren't that.
Yeah, there was like it was always the part of Assassin's Creed you kind of tolerated, that once you got into like the combat thing, it was just like, oh, this is very flashy, but the fifth fight you're in is basically you've learned everything about those games. And so I'm having fun playing Assassin's Creed Origins. In terms of this, like going deeper into the story stuff, I think the thing that I'm most satisfied with is Bayek, as
he's a great character.
He's such a fucking fantastic protagonist. And the thing that's the best part about it is that, like, on paper, the elevator pitch of, like, dad who is Egyptian super cop whose son is murdered and goes on a revenge spree is like I don't give a shit kind of pitch to me of that's basically like Watch Dogs 1. And there's so many video games that do that sort of like revenge story thing, and typically video games have done that revenge story thing very poorly, and it's very satisfying to finally see one just do it well. It turns out the main way you do it well is by making Bayek like an actual multifaceted sort of like human character, because he's not just like angry all the time, which is what the typical protagonist in that sort of revenge fiction is. It's just like their only character trait is that they're very angry, and maybe they have like one scene where they're sad, and then for the rest of the time they're just angry all the time.
Or they talk like this, like the character in Watch Dogs.
Yes, yeah, I'm Aiden Pierce, and somebody killed my niece, and I'm very, very angry about that.
I would not have remembered that name, Sean.
I only remember it because it's really dumb, and it's the name of a kind of guy that you just don't like. But Bayek isn't like that. He doesn't talk in a gruff, dumb voice. He's not angry all the time. In fact, like, he's usually a pretty cheerful guy.
And he also has this, one of the things I love about the overall structure of the game is the death of his son hasn't killed his sense of duty, so he still views his role as the last of the Magi to go around and help people. Yeah. And so much of the game is like, even though he's on a revenge mission and all this, like, he's still, if he sees an old woman in the street who needs help, that's where side quests start. And like, that's a huge part of it for me, because he still has a moral compass.
Yeah, exactly. He's still out there to help people. He's still that Magi. But then also it is like, I think for me, a huge moment in that game was once you get out of that sort of like the first area of Siwa, and then you go to that town that's sort of like the smaller town that before you get to Alexandria. And there's a whole chain of quests there with a character who's Bayek's old friend, who's like this priest in this temple. And when you meet him, you get like this sort of sense of like, oh, they're old buddies that haven't seen each other in a long time. And then this priest, like 4 kids or like 4 or 5 kids come running out, and they're like, Uncle Bayek, Uncle Bayek. And Bayek like sort of is like joking around and playing around with them. And then there's this whole like little objective where you play hide and seek with them. And you get to, it does so much of, you get to see one, like, that he was probably like an amazing dad. If you get like that sense of probably who he was as a father, you also get the sense of like that this like tragedy that happened to him has not fundamentally altered everything about him as a human being, that he's still capable of joy, he's still capable of playing with these kids, he's still capable of being very affable and happy and joyful, and that's very fun to engage with. But the most effective thing that does is that then when you get more deeper into the sort of the main quest stuff of it, in like confronting the people who are responsible for the death of your son, and that's where Bayek, like for obvious reasons, like flips into like angry revenge mode. That switch is so much more dramatically potent when you see that there's a contrast, and the anger feels so much more powerful and driven when you see that it comes from this like much more human place, and like that human place is that this guy who you have these scenes where he is sad and despondent in all the in like the constellation quests, all in with these like really sad cutscenes of him like sitting on the sand by himself, staring into the sky, reminiscing about his son, and like toying with these pebbles. And so you get those moments of him on his own. You get these moments like of like passionate love with his wife Aya, who's also an awesome character.
Can I just for a second?
Okay, yeah, I haven't gotten into really deep stuff with Aya yet, so don't spoil anything. But
all I was going to say is that the other key for me in why Bayek and the revenge story works is that while they killed his son, they didn't fridge the wife.
Yes, yeah.
And I think you'll get into it deeper. The fact that Aya is alive and a part of the story makes it so much richer than if it were like they killed his whole family.
Yeah.
It adds a whole layer that is not there in a lot of other stories like this.
And just the overall effect is that it makes the protagonist like really human and affecting, and that's what like when you have some of those assassination scenes where he's like screaming and yelling in anger, normally I kind of like blank out and be like, oh, whatever. There, it's like it really hit me in a way I was kind of surprised at, and that I didn't expect myself to be affected by those scenes in the way that I was. And I think it's because they did so much work to really flesh him out as a fully human protagonist. And then the last thing to say about it is my favorite thing about the game is obviously just like the setting is so fucking awesome. Like that moment of like riding into Alexandria for the first time and visiting the Library of Alexandria and like going up to one of the sort of the higher towers and looking around, you can see the lighthouse, you can see this huge palace, and you can see like the tomb of Alexander the Great, and just visiting all those places, admiring the architecture, just admiring the design of the city and the attention to detail in the history of it. Like that's the thing that like I am most driven by in this game, of like even when I'm in the middle of a like assassinating murder spree in this giant palace, I'm still stopping and like admiring the statue in this like beautiful giant palace. And it's just something of it's one of the ways that this game really feels like, oh, this is like a PS4 Assassin's Creed, which like we've had a couple of those, but none of them have really done it for me, other than Assassin's Creed 4, which is really a PS3 Assassin's Creed game. Is how fleshed out the interiors are. Like that city, there are so many buildings in the city that you can go into that are fully rendered, and there are like rooms and like people in them that have lines of dialogue and stuff like that. That feels like, oh, awesome. Like most games like this, you can't go into any of the buildings. And it's just like you're always on there. That's the vast majority of Assassin's Creed games are like that. This one, if you see an interesting looking building, chances are you can go into it and like the interior is entirely modeled, and that's really awesome.
Yeah, and it's something I'm of two minds with on the game, and I'm actually really curious. I'm excited for you to play more of it and hear what you think when you're done with it, because I didn't get to talk about it on the podcast until I'd played the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I think if I had reviewed it in part at the same point you are, I would have said a lot of the same things, and I agree with everything you're saying. Over time, I think the game falls down on a couple of its best elements, and I think it's too big for its own good. And, one of the things is, the game is so mind-bogglingly, obscenely big. Emphasis on the obscene, because this is an enormous game. But it is also obscenely dense. Like, you could make whole games within individual cities in Assassin's Creed Origins. And the game never gets less dense. It's always that rich in visual detail and architecture. And, to me, the best open world games, they can be really vast, but they also like give you some kind of incentive to really explore those worlds and get to know them. And in Assassin's Creed Origins, it's forward the whole way through, and the game is so big, it just feels like you're never, ever going to go back to a spot you've already been. And it's one of the things where, like, I think they learned so many things in making Assassin's Creed Origins that made the series better. And I hope what they take into the next one is maybe a greater sense of focus on the strengths they clearly display in Origins, because those strengths are extraordinary.
Yeah.
So
I'm curious to see how I make my path through the game, because like there's like a part of me that I'm entirely open to. I might not finish this game. Like I might not finish the main quest. I might peter out, because we're also like January is not an empty month of video games. It like Digimon comes out in a week. Then like a week after that or 2 weeks after that, we get Dragon Ball and Monster Hunter. So it's like there are lots of other games to be playing, which makes it all the more sort of confounding that in the middle of playing Assassin's Creed Origins, kind of just not entirely out of nowhere, it'll make sense when I say what the game is, but like not super motivated. I just played all the way through. This is a game I've played through multiple times before, but I played all the way through Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast on the PC.
What is that game? Actually,
Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast, which is...
Okay.
So... Here's a brief history lesson on Star Wars video games. I have a whole thing to talk about this game because I think it's awesome and it's weird and it's an all over the place game, but it's one of my favorite Star Wars games. It is despite being called Star Wars Jedi Knight 2, it is the third game in the Dark Forces series of Star Wars games. So back in like the mid-90s, there was a Doom-style first-person shooter Star Wars game made by LucasArts called Star Wars Dark Forces, where you star as Kyle Katarn, like roguishly handsome rebel mercenary who is the actual person who stole the plans to the Death Star. Despite what movie you may have seen, that's not how it fucking happened. It was Kyle Katarn being a fucking badass, going in there all on his own. He didn't need a goddamn team. He just went there all on his own, murdered about 100 stormtroopers, and stole the Death Star plans. And so that's kind of like the first game. There is a lot of other stuff that happens. That's sort of like the first game. It was a cool, it basically impossible to go back to, but a revolutionary first-person shooter for the time. Then, in the sort of Half-Life era first-person shooters, LucasArts made a sequel called Star Wars Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight. This
is like the Rambo titles.
It's one of my favorite weird title series ever. So in Dark Forces 2 Jedi Knight, you still play as Kyle Katarn, but now he gets, over the course of the story, he gets Jedi powers and you get a lightsaber. And that one is a more go-backable to sort of video game, if that's a phrase I can use. It holds up a bit more if you can kind of like understand that you're a first-person shooters. It's this weird middle ground between modern first-person shooters and like the Labyrinth maze sort of like Doom shooters. And that game is kind of cool, and it's got the best part of that game is that it has live action FMV cutscenes with like a weird actor playing Kyle Katarn, and the villain Jarek is this dark Jedi who has like this weird visor on his eyes or something. It's that game's good but weird. And then in the early 2000s, Raven Software, which is a video game studio that no longer exists because Activision bought them and then threw them into the Call of Duty DLC mines, and nobody ever saw them since. They made Star Wars Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast, deciding that Star Wars Dark Forces 3 Jedi Knight 2 Jedi Outcast was too absurd a title, so they just dropped the Dark Forces. And so this is the one I replayed. Then they also made a sequel that I might play through again at some point, that's Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy. So they decided to drop the number entirely from Jedi Knight and make it, because it's sort of like a side sequel, because you don't play as Kyle in that game, you play as his Jedi apprentice. But anyways, that's sort of like a preamble to what Jedi Knight 2 and Jedi Academy are as games, are, in my opinion, the finest Jedi action games that have ever been made, which is something that you'd think there'd be a lot of those, but there's kind of not, particularly in terms of more modern games. The only other one is really like The Force Unleashed, and then The Force Unleashed 2, which are okay games, but they miss one like crucial element about the lightsaber combat, which is in Jedi Knight 2 and in Jedi Academy, the lightsaber is basically a one-hit kill on almost anybody. Especially if you do what I did, which you have to play this game on PC for a couple of reasons. One of them being you can go in and you can turn on what is called Saber Realistic Combat, G_Saber Realistic Combat, which is a mode they put into the game that sort of turns on full dismemberment, to use the expression, of in the shipping game of like what you would play if like you played like the console version of the game and didn't have access to the sort of like the text files on the PC and stuff. What you would see is that like your lightsaber still basically killed almost like a stormtrooper absolutely in one hit, most enemies, even like the Dark Jedi, in basically one hit. But like if you hit them in the hand or somewhere like there will be special animations for like their hand getting cut off, like Luke in Empire or something like that, and then collapsing to the ground. But on the PC, you can turn on this mode that they included in the game where I think it's basically anywhere in the character model where there is a joint. So it's like at the wrist, at like the halfway point up the arm, at the shoulder, etc., and like at like the waist and the head and stuff like that. You can, if you hit them there, that part of the character model will be bisected and cut off from the other side of the character model, which is very goofy looking in some ways, of like, you know, it'll be something like you'll cut a stormtrooper in half and they'll be playing this sort of like death animation, and the torso will be on one side of the room and his legs will be on the other side of the room, but they're both obviously playing the same death animation at the same time, separated. So it's like not like designed in any real like direct way. You have to kind of get into the game to do it. But they did, like, it is included by the developers. Just like, obviously, if it was like in the shipping game in terms of like you just like could flip it on in the options menu, this game would have to have like an M rating or something, because it gets kind of gruesome in ways. There's no blood, but it's still, you're just like hacking people to pieces. And it's just such a tremendously satisfying game to play, especially when you have that mode on. If you just walk into a room, it's full of stormtroopers, and you also have access to a full suite of force powers. That another reason why you should play it on the PC is that you can bind all the force powers to different keys. And then I also have a forward button and a backwards button on my mouse that I assign force push and force pull to. So if you're playing on the console, you end up in a situation where you have to kind of cycle through the powers one by one to be able to use each one. Whereas on the PC, you can use them basically all of them simultaneously as long as you have enough energy to do so. So you just run into a room full of stormtroopers, turn on force speed that makes everything slow motion, run through, just like throwing lightsabers and cutting dudes' heads off, just like lifting someone up with force choke and throwing a lightsaber and cutting his legs off, just spinning around in a circle and cutting arms off and limbs are flying everywhere. My favorite thing to do is once you have a high enough force jump and force pull, just jumping super high into the air, staring down at the ground, using force pull on stormtroopers, and they go flying up over your head and crash back down to the ground and die from the fall damage. It's just... And then the other thing is that you have lightsaber fights with obviously the evil Jedi, the Dark Jedi in the game. And there's something about the lightsaber mechanics in the game that are really interesting, of that it's not like Force Unleashed or a conventional action game that's sort of like, like a square, triangle combos and stuff like that. You just click down the left mouse button, and your character does a lightsaber swing, and depending on what direction you're moving in, that determines what attacks you're doing. So if you're like moving to the right, you'll do a horizontal swing to the right, almost kind of like a more fleshed out version of what the Ocarina of Time system is. Like you're moving forward, you do a forward stab and that kind of stuff. And that creates this really interesting flow of combat that makes it so that there's still a game to be played in killing everybody in one hit with your lightsaber, in a way that in a conventional action game, you just clear everything in a second and it wouldn't be interesting. Here, there's like an artfulness to like sort of like spinning around, and you actually move your character to do like a big sort of like wide swing and stuff like that. And there's an interesting sort of dance you have to do that feels sort of reminiscent of how the lightsaber fights are choreographed in the original trilogy, which this game is sort of set in that sort of old expanded universe. So it's sort of more tied to that, and it's stormtroopers and Luke Skywalker and stuff like that, and not prequel stuff. And it's the one problem with the game is that it is paced very poorly. Some of the level design is not great. The first half of the game, like the first third of the game, you don't have access to your force powers and lightsaber yet, so it's a more conventional first-person shooter. And so it is definitely not by any means a perfect game. But if you just want to sort of engage with the fantasy of being a Jedi in a video game, Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy are by far the best games for that I've ever played. And it says something, I think, about the quality of Star Wars The Last Jedi as like evoking Star Wars movies, that there have been 3 new Star Wars movies, and this is the one that has compelled me to want to go back and play an old Star Wars game, and the other 2 didn't. And that's like the real reason probably why I went back and played this one sort of out of the blue, is like, I feel like doing some Star Wars thing, and there's not a lot more satisfying Star Wars stuff than going into a room full of stormtroopers and Jedi Outcast, and 3 seconds later, they're just being body parts sprawled all across the floor.
It does say something about The Last Jedi, because it's also gotten me thinking about Star Wars a lot. In fact, we're going to be doing a podcast project we'll announce soon on that, with some new Star Wars stuff. But also, I played a little bit of a Star Wars game over the break.
Okay.
So this kind of transition, I actually forgot I'd tried this. But so now that there is original Xbox backwards compatibility on Xbox One,
yes,
I had to be very careful about that sentence.
Yes.
Because what I want to say is the Xbox One can now play Xbox One games.
Which is true in 2 different ways.
Yes.
But very confusingly so.
One of the games that's on that service now is Knights of the Old Republic.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
And they actually have added it to their digital storefront, so you don't even need a disc. You can just buy it. It's $10, which is totally fair. And I'd been searching for a new game to play over Christmas, so I bought that game and downloaded it. And first thing I'll say is that like the backwards compatibility for that works amazingly. I haven't tried the other ones. These clearly run differently than the 360 games on Xbox One, where literally you go into like 360 mode on Xbox One for those. With this, like they've had to fully emulate them, and as a result, the game looks really good. It's in 4:3, but it's running at 1080p. Like, it looks great. It runs, it loads really fast. All of that is nice. I played about 2 or 3 hours of the game, and I do at some point want to go back and play the whole thing. I have not played Knights of the Old Republic before.
Right.
It is an old game at this point.
Yes, it's from like 2003.
And I was very confused playing that game. I just have to say.
Because it's totally different from most other kinds of games. It's this weird mix of like turn-based and live-action stuff that if you haven't played like a AD&D or something like that, it's kind of confusing.
And like, the first 2 hours are just tutorial the video game. And like... Right. But, like, really, like, BioWare was not good at tutorializing at this point, because it'll be, like, just walls and walls of text explaining systems and making them sound way more complicated than they actually are. Like, they're explaining the dice rolls and everything to you, and it's just, like, very bizarre. I was enjoying the story, but it was also, like, I was just having a little bit of trouble getting into it, and I wound up moving on to something else, because Christmas for me, or the holidays, are always a time for comfort food gaming, which because it's not nostalgia for me, it's like, it is something I want to experience as a piece of video game history and maybe something more, but I wasn't quite in the mood to like put the effort into it. But I do want to say, if you would like to play Knights of the Old Republic on a console, which I think is understandable, because like I don't like playing with a mouse and keyboard, and that game I will say, I have tried playing it on my Mac, and I have not made it off the ship. Like, I was able to get much further just because it was a controller with buttons. I understood. I literally cannot understand that game on a computer, but because I've never played games like that. It's just, But anyway, it is cool that it's on there, because BioWare, I think, is allergic to re-releasing their games, which is weird because they're owned by EA, and you think EA would do that for them, but no. So I don't think KOTOR is ever going to get an update. But not, it's there on Xbox now, and that's very cool.
Yeah. Here's a hot tip for Knights of the Old Republic, is that if you're playing the console version, if you press the Y button when you're outside of combat and just walking around your character and you're using melee weapons, your character will do a cool little flourish, which is when you have a lightsaber equipped, is a lot of fun because it just makes the lightsaber noise over and over and over again. Which is also, actually, that's another point about the Jedi Outcast game. The third reason you have to play it on the fucking PC is that if you're playing it on the console versions of the game, once you have the lightsaber equipped, there is no way to turn the lightsaber off other than switching to a gun, which you never want to use a gun once you have your lightsaber. And so if you're playing the console version, which is the original way I played the game, it's just the through the entire fucking game. Whereas if you're playing on the PC, you can just hit the one key again, which is select what lightsaber, and it turns it off and turns it on. It makes an absurd difference when you have control over whether or not you want to hear a constant hum or not.
Nice.
So yes, but that is also for KOTOR. If you want to hear the cool lightsaber noise, you press the Y button.
So I mostly spent, other than my brief flirtation with KOTOR, which I'll get back to. I'm glad it's there. But anyway, I've been playing some old games again, and one of these was a game I did not expect to play again this Christmas, but has, to my kind of surprise but also pleasure, become an annual tradition for me, is I played Papers, Please again. I think I have played Papers, Please every holiday since it came out.
I mean, there's nothing quite like Christmas to make you feel like, you know what, I want to roleplay as a, like, middle manager, like, paper man, like, in the fucking dystopian the Eastern European country.
I can't describe why it works so well for me, but there is something about, especially because this is what I was playing while I was working on my top 10 list and watching all these movies and stuff, like, because I was putting a lot of brain power into that, because, especially with that kind of project, it's not just watching movies. I'm taking notes and I'm thinking very critically. It's a lot of work. But there's something about, like, just being a middle manager paper pusher in Papers, Please that, like, is a warm blanket to go back to. And
I would never describe Papers, Please as warm. It's an amazing game. Warm is just not an adjective I would use.
But no, I have it on it's one of the few games I play on my Mac. I've played it, I think, every holiday since it came out. And this year it was on Vita, because we talked about that. They, for some reason, 4 years later, they finally brought it to Vita. And I had gotten my Vita out again for the whole story I told last time of helping my brother play Persona 4. And I had my Vita out, and I'm like, well, I don't have a memory card for my Vita at this point, but my Vita, because it's a new one, does have a little bit of internal storage, and I checked, and Papers, Please will fit on that, so I bought it on Vita, and it's my favorite version of the game. It's very good. It's the only Vita game I think I own that significantly uses the touchscreen.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, but it uses the... I assume it's similar to the iPad version, which I've never got, but it uses the touchscreen for basically what the mouse would do in all those places, and then, of course, the buttons for what the key commands would be. But it's very, very intuitive. I think they've made some very smart decisions in how to adapt the game to a smaller screen. Like, one of the things is that instead of all the visual information just being on the screen at once, because it's a smaller screen, you have to, like, on the D-pad or the stick, scroll up or down. And when you go up, it's the screen with all the people, like, in the line and the people talking to you and that. And if you go down, it's your desk. And it actually works as a way you can kind of like, all my stuff's down here and I go back. It's almost like your head, like you look down to your desk and up to talk to people. And if you're looking down at your desk, the dialogue bubbles still come in, so like you're not missing anything. But it's very intuitive, very easy to play, uses the touchscreen very well, the buttons very well. It runs perfectly. It looks better on the Vita screen than I think it does on the computer, just because it's more, smaller and more concentrated. But I had fun with it, and I played it thoroughly, Sean. I got every trophy.
Jesus.
There's no platinum because it's a short game, but I did 100% Papers, Please. And it took me about like a week and a half. And by the time I was done with it, that's when I started searching for new games to play, because it's like, there's literally nothing more for me to play in Papers, Please. I did everything. What do I play next? And so I was fucking around. I played about an hour or two of the female route of Persona 3 Portable, because I was jealous of my brother playing Persona 4 Golden, and I'm like, maybe I want to play some Persona. And I got into Tartarus for the first time, and I just didn't have the heart to dive in again, especially knowing we have like 5 JRPGs in the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, you have to recharge your batteries for sure.
Yeah, so I was like, that won't work. And then I tried KOTOR, and I'm like, I can't. You seem like an amazing game, KOTOR. I'm sure you are. I just can't right now. And then, lo and behold, Xbox Live was having a sale, as they are wont to do. And they had Batman Return to Arkham, the Arkham Asylum Arkham City Remaster Collection, for $10.
That is a really good price.
For some reason, because they'd fucked something up, because Microsoft fucks stuff up all the time. They'd sent me a $5 gift card for Xbox, and I'm like, I can get 2 Batman games for $5. I'm doing this, and I've played through all of Arkham Asylum. I got all the Riddler stuff in that game. I did not finish all the challenges, because this will be part of my analysis. Asylum is very hard to go back to on the combat.
Yeah.
But I'm now in the thick of Arkham City and having so much fun. The Batman games are really good, Sean.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
I've been wanting to go back and replay these for a while. I got the itch last year because we had since 2009 a new Batman game every 2 years, and then 2017 no new Batman game, because obviously Arkham Knight is the end. I'm a little surprised WB hasn't done anything with it.
There's a lot of rumors that they have tried to do things, and those projects have not come to fruition.
Yeah. Okay.
So, yeah, I assume that there are like a couple of scrapped projects as to the reason why there has not been a new one.
Yeah, but anyway, but for now, like, this Batman series is over for now, and I'd been kind of having the itch to go back and revisit some of these, because I think Arkham Knight, the newest one, is one of the most underrated games ever made.
Yeah, I agree. Certainly this generation.
Because all the gaming press talks about with Arkham Knight is that it was broken on PC for a couple months at launch, and I think that is such a dereliction of journalistic duty, in that, one, most people didn't play it on PC. That's a tiny sliver of the audience. 2, they did fix it. My brothers played it on PC. It's fine now. Yeah. And 3, that doesn't affect the quality of the game. Like, Rocksteady didn't even make the PC port.
Yeah.
If you talk about the actual game, it's an amazing fucking game. And this is in a generation where I think one of the underreported stories of this generation is that Western game developers haven't been doing that much interesting stuff. Like, you have Naughty Dog, and Bethesda's certainly publishing a lot of interesting stuff. But in general, the best Western game of this generation is The Witcher 3, which is Polish.
Yeah.
And who had played a Polish game before The Witcher 3? The people who played Witcher 2 and 1. That's it. That's how that goes. Japan has really been carrying this generation, I think. And Arkham Knight is, I think, certainly, if you take Poland out of the equation, maybe the best Western game made this generation. It's up there with Doom. It's up there with Uncharted 4. Yeah. It's an amazing, amazing accomplishment, and no one talks about it in that conversation, and that frustrates me. So also because we've had all these shitty DC movies lately and stuff, I've been wanting to go back and revisit the Arkham trilogy, plus Origins, because I like that one too. Now that it's all done, it's all out there, and, Arkham Asylum is almost a decade old now. It's a really interesting thing to go back and look at. I'll say first, this remaster collection is not great.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
It's very poorly optimized, at least on Xbox. Can't speak to PS4, but I doubt this kind of thing would have huge differences there. Like, the Xbox One has some issues. It's more than powerful enough to run Arkham fucking City, you know?
Right, yeah.
I played that on Xbox 360, and it ran better on Xbox 360. It's a little disappointing. Like,
I wonder how it runs compared to the Wii U version.
Well, there's that. Like I'll say, Arkham Asylum is mostly fine. I enjoyed it just fine. Definitely it's a minor visual upgrade, but it is a visual upgrade. Everything's there, all the DLC. Like I had never seen. There's a mode where you can play as the Joker in challenge
right,
maps.
because that was like a PS3 exclusive.
Yeah, and that's here now, so I'd never seen that before. So really enjoyed it. The only thing was sometimes in the outdoor locations of Arkham Asylum, there would be some frame rate dips. And you're not out there that much in Arkham Asylum.
No.
So it didn't matter
also,
that much.
that's weird to me because it's not like Arkham City where there's like an open world that like once you go outside the building there's like a whole open world you can go to. In Arkham Asylum, being outside means you can see the like city skyline, but that's it because you're just on Arkham Island. So that's kind of weird.
Yeah, and it's not that frequent. Like the Asylum one is fine. Now, I think it's a lazy remaster in so much as there are so many things you could do in revisiting Arkham Asylum to like bring it up to snuff a little bit in terms of the innovations that have been made with that series. Like, I think adding a couple things to the combat system that were in later games would be nice. Like, not new gadgets. I just mean like fixing like the combo time and stuff, like and counter time. Like
it was their first time out with that combat system. Going back to it, you just realize how much they refined the timing on all that stuff.
And all my instincts were off. Like it was hard to do what I'm used to doing in Arkham for a while. And it's like it's okay that they didn't do anything with that, but that, you know, you could have. Like it's
sure, yeah.
Like they put in clearly minimal effort on this, and it's better than nothing. But it's there. Now, when you get to Arkham City, I was worried throughout Arkham Asylum, though, because I'm like, okay, Arkham Asylum's mostly fine, but those outdoor parts are a little rougher, and that's what Arkham City is.
Yeah.
And I get to Arkham City, and the open world parts where you're in Arkham City itself are a mess. And very poorly optimized. Like, my brother walked out and saw me playing the game. He's like, what's going on with that? Because he saw me doing, like, the grapnel boost, and the frame rate just went to shit. And it's like, I don't know. He's like, because he's only played it on PC now, like years later, where it runs beautifully in 4K and stuff. Right. And like, he's like, was it like that on 360? And I'm like, no, it wasn't. It was actually pretty much a technical marvel back in the day. That was one of the first games we talked about on this podcast.
That's true.
But anyway, so like, it's not really ruining my enjoyment of the game, but it is a lot rougher. And my kind of end result is I just wish both of these were on the Xbox backwards compatibility. Because the 360 versions would probably run better. Like, they'd be a slightly lower resolution, but whatever. Like, it's the game. Like, the nice thing, again, Arkham City also had a shit ton of DLC, and it's all collected. That's very nice.
Yeah, if you like challenge maps, which I did,
there's
a lot of stuff for you to do in Arkham City. I played it on 360, so there were not platinums. Buy platinum that game.
Yeah, no, it's really fun to go back to all that. You know, it's still a great game, but yeah, so the remasters have some issues. If you want to play them again, though, on a modern console, this is how you have to do it. And, you know, for $10, totally worth it. And I think at most these go for like $20 at this point. I was going to actually buy this on PlayStation, and then Xbox had a sale that was like half the price. And I'm like, well, you know, I prefer my PlayStation, but that's cheaper, whatever. And that's actually where I played Arkham Knight, so they're all together there. And they do have Arkham Origins did not get a remaster, but they do have it on backwards compatibility on Xbox One, so I picked up like a $5 copy off eBay because I played that on PS3 back in the day, so I like that game a lot too, so I'm glad it's there. And I will look forward to Arkham Origins now being the one that runs best of those three.
Yeah, which is a weird position to be in.
But those games are so good, Sean. Like,
yes, they are.
I was worried that, like, you know, take the nostalgia goggles off, play them today, they wouldn't hold up. No, Arkham Asylum has some little issues here and there where it was the first time they'd done this. But it's great. Arkham Asylum is basically a Metroid game.
Yeah.
And I actually, if they ever do another Batman, that's where I would actually like to see them go, is like do that kind of like contained single location thing again rather than get bigger again after Arkham Knight, because it's a really compelling thing. And I think particularly the way all the Riddler challenges are laid out in that one is really fun, because it feels more like, again, like Metroid collectibles or something. It's really, really neat to play. I don't think the writing is nearly as good as it is in the sequels, and that is kind of noticeable going back. But it's still very good. It's still, if it weren't for the sequels, it would be the best comic book game.
Right, yeah.
So it's awesome. Mark Hamill is so good. That's the other thing is, like, I'm still getting a little of my Star Wars fix because it's Mark Hamill. It's just as his true best role, the Joker. And, oh my God, he's so good in that game. It's a lot of fun. It's Arkham Asylum is also way shorter than I remembered.
You can get through that pretty quick.
I think I played the campaign in 2 days and then spent another couple, getting all the other stuff. But had a blast with that. I've started City. Arkham City, I really like, my theory of the Arkham games is they are the game equivalent of the Jason Bourne trilogy in movies, where, like, the Bourne Identity, the first one, it's very good, not necessarily great, but it has a lot of cool innovations and, like, is a cool new thing. And then for the sequel, like, they go ape shit and make a fucking masterpiece with, like, the Bourne Supremacy. That's what Arkham City is. And then the third one is, like, not necessarily another huge leap forward. It's just enough of a refinement that it's still the best one.
Yeah.
And I think that's what these are. Arkham City, like, from a story perspective, it's so funny to go back because it shouldn't work. It's like every villain in the Batman universe is thrown in there. The story has so much happening. Like, every time Batman starts to get a handle on one thing, 5 new things crop up. But I think because it is a video game, they can do that and they can tell that, and it's one of the best Batman stories.
Yeah. And it just has, I loved all the different, like, small side quests and stuff
so
like
good.
that, with, like, Hush and all those sort of smaller stories they can tell on the side.
I've been doing some of the Victor Zsasz stuff, and that's really good.
Zsasz is fun.
It's just great, and it's also like, it's kind of funny to go back to Arkham City and be like, right, this is what a big open world felt like in 2011. Because it's tiny compared to a lot of games now. It's like, you can traverse Arkham City. It's just one little loop. But, like, it felt very big at the time, and compared to Asylum, certainly, it's amazing they did that game only 2 years later. It's a huge leap forward. The combat is, like, it would take another improvement in Arkham Knight, but by the point of City, like, all your instincts are there. Like, it works great. I've been going back and playing the challenges as I unlock them just because they're so much fun. And it's just a blast. I really fucking love that game. And the best thing about Arkham City remains, to me, the costumes you can put Batman in.
Yeah.
I know they added them later in Arkham Knight, but I have not gone back and replayed it with the costumes. I have seen very little of Arkham City so far in the actual costume from the game. I put him in something else all the time, and it's so fun. And for some reason, it always works. Whatever weird costume you put him in, I'm just like, yeah, I can accept 1970s Batman with the blue cape and the yellow logo in this dark world.
Yeah, that's one of the things that made the challenge mission so much fun to do. Is it's a good, like, tight way to go through a bunch of the costumes. Yeah, because then they have a bunch of them for all the different playable characters like Robin and Nightwing and Catwoman.
The one I've defaulted to in campaign more than any other is animated Batman, because seeing animated Batman from the animated series in Arkham City is just very funny. But my favorite Batman costume remains 1970s with the blue cape.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite one from that game as well.
I had that as an action figure when I was a kid that, like, I got in a garage sale. So I've always had an affinity for that Batman, and it was very cool. And it also has reminded me, like, Batman costumes are so boring today. Batman always has the same boring fucking armor on. And, like, there are so many ways to make the Batman costume fun, and they never do it. And it makes me sad.
Yeah, it's particularly the movies, I think, have gotten bad about it. Of, like, the Nolan movies just went for, like, body armor Batman. The new ones went for, like, pseudo Dark Knight Returns, like, chunky Batman. It's like, fucking put some color on that guy. Like, do something cool with it. Or, like, if you're going to do with, like the sleek black look, I really liked what Arkham Knight did.
That's really good.
Going all in with it and just making it look fucking awesome and futuristic and cool.
Yeah. So anyway, I might, I'll have to stop at some point because new games are coming out, but this will be a fun project to keep going back to.
Yeah.
Because they're, I can come in and out of these games easily.
Yeah.
They're just so good. And that combat system, man, it is... I don't get into combat systems. It's just not my thing in gaming. There's something accessible about the Arkham games, though, where, like, you don't have to be a genius at this to master that system, and I love that. Like, it is both very, very deep and challenging, and also extremely accessible, and that is a point on the Venn diagram you almost never see.
Yeah.
You know,
it's the kind of thing of like talking about Assassin's Creed earlier. You know, Arkham Asylum and Assassin's Creed 1 came out kind of close to each other. Like Assassin's Creed 1 was like 2 or 3 years earlier, but it kind of felt like both those games were going for the same thing, and Assassin's Creed 1 just missed it by a country mile. And like Arkham Asylum, like again, like they would obviously refine it, but for the first time playing a combat system like that, I was like, holy shit, you guys nailed it. Like you said, you found this thing of like it's immediately accessible and like legible and engageable and fun, but it also has this tremendous skill ceiling, which is why those challenge maps get so much fun, because once you get really good at the game, like going into those challenge maps and just clearing an entire room of like 50 guys without taking a single hit and using all your different moves and stuff to get your like differentiation combo up is so satisfying. It's one of the most satisfying combat systems in any game I've played.
And that's why when I say like the combat in Asylum feels off today, that's not really a criticism of that game. It's just that it got so much better, and it's such a skill-based thing that like you can't unlearn it. Like there's just like the way in Asylum, you don't really jump to enemies the same way, so it's really easy to miss moves you think in your head you should be getting, and that just speaks to how good it got over time, you know? So yeah, and I again, like just as pieces of narrative too, they are exemplary. These continue to be my favorite Batman stories. Like just, I think Batman takes to video games so well, and Rocksteady did such a good job with him here, you know, basically just as a, you know, kind of a weird sequel to the animated series or something. There's nothing like it. And I hope that the Insomniac Spider-Man game this year is finally something else can go on the shelf with it.
Yeah, me too.
And I feel like that's a little unfair to the new Spider-Man game to hold it to that standard, but that is kind of in my heart of hearts what I want out of it.
Yeah, no.
And it could totally be that. If anyone can do it, it's them.
Yes, yeah, no, they are a studio capable of it. But then also that, like, it has been this will be the third year since Arkham Knight.
Yeah.
I'm very curious to see what Rocksteady has been working on.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
Have there been any rumors? Do you know?
There were rumors for a while that they were going to make a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, which I feel like those were so long ago that I don't think those are true. There were rumors about them making a Superman game. That was like after Arkham City. I don't think that's true either. I have no idea what they're making.
Here's my conspiracy theory.
Okay.
All right. Arkham Asylum is basically a Metroid game with Batman in it. Nintendo has announced Metroid Prime 4, but not told us who's developing it. Crazier things have happened. They hired Rocksteady to make Metroid Prime 4.
No. That would be an amazing, weird, insane choice to make. But no, no way.
Do you think that might have leaked at some point if that had happened?
Yeah, there's no world in which that could possibly happen. That would be insane.
Yeah. Anyway, you want to talk some news, Sean?
What's going on in the news, Jonathan?
Let's do a couple of quick ones here. Okay, first off, we have speculated about this for years. It is finally happening. The Doctor Who Series 9 soundtrack, the season that aired in 2015.
Yes, the same year that Arkham Knight came out.
Yes, has finally been announced by Silva Screen Records, the company that does the Doctor Who soundtracks. For some reason, after Series 8, the first Capaldi year, they just stopped doing these. The Doctor Who soundtracks were always something special, both because Murray Gold is a great composer and because they put more and more work into them every year. And, you know, they presented as much of the music as they could. They were very thorough, very well done. And then, as soon as we get Doctor Who's best season, they stopped. And that
also has Heaven Sent, which has some of the best music.
Yes. So they have finally announced it after years of fan petitions and asks and all that. And it sounds like they are doing it justice. It's going to come early 2018. We don't have a date yet. But it is a 4-disc set, which is the biggest for any Doctor Who season. And that includes a disc that is wholly devoted to Heaven Sent. So they know what's up. Heaven Sent gets its own disc. Husbands of River Song also gets its own disc. They've always done that for the Christmas specials. So that makes sense. I'm just excited. We're finally going to get it. It's a little too late for me to use the fucking music as podcast themes, because I've wanted to use Heaven Sent music a lot, and it's just not out there.
Yeah.
So, anyway, that's cool. I look forward to listening to it. Hope we get Series 10, and then, you know, if this is the end of Murray Gold's involvement in the series, which we will speculate wildly about later, I just hope they get it all out, and then treat the new composer well.
Yeah.
Getting his or her music out. But Yeah, it's cool.
Yes,
All right.
no, I'm very happy to finally get that music.
All right. Here's a block of announcements from Atlas, who makes the Persona games.
Right, yes. This happened when I was on the cruise, and I was very frustrated to not be able to watch these trailers for like a week.
Persona 5, the animation, is beginning in Japan April 2018, and they have announced, both for the animation and a game we're about to talk about, the official name of the protagonist is now Ren Amamiya.
Yes.
I like that name.
That's a good name. It's not as good as Akatsuki Shun, but it will do.
Yes. No, you know Yu Narukami, but it's very good.
No, yeah. I'm sure I'll get used to it immediately.
I actually like the name Ren a lot for him. That makes sense.
It fits really well.
Yeah. So we're excited for Persona 5, the animation.
Yes, yeah.
Hope we hear about a simulcast thing for that. That would not surprise me.
Yeah,
I
I assume Crunchyroll is going to get it because they have the Persona 4 animation stuff, and they have Persona 5, the animation Daybreakers, which is the like special OVA they made when the game came out. So.
But that's going to be cool. Now that my brother has played Persona 3, 4, and 5, he's very excited to watch all the anime stuff with me. Great. And I'm like, oh, you have so much for me to show you.
Yeah, it's like finally like paying $100 for all the like each successive Blu-ray movie for Persona 3. You have someone else to show it to.
I know. I have
get your money's worth out of it.
I had you, and I spent $240 total on those 4 Blu-rays.
Yeah.
So anyway, all right. Also, Persona 3, Dancing Moon Knight, and Persona 5, Dancing Star Knight, the dancing spin-off games for Persona 3 and 5, are launching in Japan on May 24th for the PS4 and the PS Vita, which is neat. Both games will have special editions that will include the full soundtracks, and Persona 4 Dancing All Night will be included as a port for the PS4.
Yeah.
And while none of this has been announced for the West, I would assume we'll get all of that for the West at some point.
Probably, yeah.
So, because they did that for the Persona 4 Dancing All Night for the Vita. Anyway, Sean, how cool is this?
It's awesome. It also puts me personally in this weird precarious position of I need them to let me know very soon whether or not the Japanese voices are going to be in the game, because that will determine whether or not I import the Japanese versions of the game, which would be kind of significantly more expensive, or just buy the English versions of the game. I need to know. This is information I need to know. Most people don't need to know. I fucking need to know this. No, I got so close to pre-ordering it, and I was like, "This is so much fucking money."
Were you trying to order like the big special edition with everything?
Yes, yeah.
I hope they replicate that here, because I would also like Persona 4 Dancing All Night on PS4 here.
Yeah.
But anyway, these games look so good, Sean.
Yeah, the trailers are really awesome.
I've been playing a lot of Persona 4 Dancing All Night again just for fun on my Vita, and got it. And I've gotten Thomas into the game because he just finished Persona 4 Golden, so I'm like, here's another cartridge, play this one next, and he's been loving that. So yeah, and he's been asking me all this question like, are we gonna get a full story for these other two? And I'm like, well, we don't really know yet, probably not that in depth, but we'll get something.
There was some story visual novel looking stuff in the trailers they showed, so
who knows,
there's going to be some sort of story mode. I have no idea. Like, I just like getting remixes of a bunch of those songs, seeing the costumes. I really want those games. I
do too. All right. And finally from Atlas, Catherine, which is the game the Persona team made between Persona 4 and Persona 5.
Yeah.
And if you haven't played it, is the basis for a lot of technical stuff in Persona 5, and is also a great game in its own right, is being remade for the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation Vita, coming to Japan this year, probably coming to the West later this year. We'll find out. Overall, looks cool. Catherine is a great game, but there was a controversy with this.
Right, yeah.
Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I have not looked super deep into it because I never finished Catherine. It's been always like a game I've wanted to go back to, but it was something about the puzzle mechanics never quite did it for me in that game, so I just sort of petered off. Because also by the time I played it, it was like a 4 or 5 year old game. But yeah, I guess so for this version of the game, they're adding in a new Catherine that is just named Ren or Reen. That there's not like any real information about the character out there, but there's some indications that the character might be transgendered, which Catherine, the base game, already has a sort of like weird relationship with that of one of the characters, a sort of a smaller character in the game. I think it's like in the true ending, it's revealed that she's transgendered. It's a whole.
I don't know if it's the true ending. That game has like 20 endings.
Yeah, it's like I think it's like one of the endings that's harder to unlock because again I didn't finish the game. But people don't like about how that was handled. Or lots of people don't like how it's handled. There are some people that do like how it's handled. People got in a big Twitter fight over it. in a way that's kind of hard to get a sense of what's going on. And again, like with this new character, there's no real information. Like there's like I from what I have seen and what people are putting together, I suspect that they are right, but there's no official thing to go off of.
It's interesting. I do think there's more nuance to this whole conversation than, Twitter makes it sound, which is true for everything on Twitter. Atlas, as game makers, do many, many things very well. Representations of LGBT people is not one of them.
Yeah.
But you also do have to recognize that it's rooted in larger Japanese culture. They don't exist on an island, and they certainly don't exist on an island in American culture where we view them by those exact same standards. Does that mean it's wrong to be offended by their representations of LGBT culture? No. You are absolutely in your right to be offended, and there are things that are, I think, offensive in how they have treated gay characters, particularly in those little moments in Persona 5 where that happened. I think the way they portray like kanji in Persona 4, I ultimately come down on the side of I think it's an interesting and sympathetic portrayal, while I still also understand the things that are offensive about it. Again, this is rooted in a lot of cultural things you can't disconnect from the conversation. That is just Japan views LGBT subculture very, very differently than America. And it is a hard conversation to have. It does feel like the thing that is worrisome is that if Atlas is going for it in a more, it's not a thing in the background, it's going to be a foreground thing.
Yeah, because that's always been the thing, is it's basically, with the exception of some of the stuff in Persona 4, which, again, I think, some of, there's a cultural miscommunication about, I think the intentions in the characters.
Yes.
Because of the way things are coded in American culture that are not necessarily coded that way in Japanese culture, that things are different. Generally speaking, this stuff, like in Persona 5 and like in Catherine, has been small things in, the corner that you can enjoy the vast majority of whatever it is, and just be annoyed and frustrated with this one little part, but doesn't necessarily infect everything else.
Yeah.
If this is that and it's handled poorly, and it is a whole new extra character that has her whole own storyline injected into the story of Catherine, that could be a big problem.
It absolutely could. It's just we don't know yet. If you look at this and you're like, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole because I don't like how they've handled it in the past, perfectly reasonable opinion.
Yeah.
I am interested in this remake. I do think Catherine is a really interesting, smart game with a really smart narrative about maturity in relationships and sexuality that, straight sexuality in that case, that is worth playing and experiencing. And I do think, it's always good when a game kind of gets ported up to a new generation so we can experience it again. But yeah, I'm curious to see how they handle that.
Yeah.
And not necessarily hopeful, because I do think, not a great track record there.
Yeah.
Certainly not by our standards. So, yeah. Anyway, anything else to say about the Atlas-a-thon there?
No, I'm curious about the Catherine thing. I desperately need to know about the Japanese language stuff for those Persona dancing
I feel
games.
like we're pretty firmly in an era of dual audio, but you never know.
But Persona 4 Dancing All Night didn't, so it's
But that was before the era of dual audio, fully.
But it didn't, and so
I know.
This is sequels to that game.
Yeah, so, I mean, Persona 4 didn't, and Persona 5 did, so, yeah.
But Persona 5... barely did.
Barely did.
Persona 5 squeaked through with the Japanese language option.
But it's happening more and more. So I'd be surprised if it wasn't. But yes, as I will keep an eye on it for you, Sean.
Okay, yeah, I will. I am keeping an eye on it for myself. Thank you.
Finally, Nintendo revealed some new sales numbers for the Nintendo Switch.
Right, yeah.
I just wanted to go through these because it is truly incredible. At 3.4 million units sold in Japan, keeping in mind Japan is not as big a country as the US.
Right, yeah.
It has outsold the entire lifetime sales of the Wii U in its home nation of Japan, and is already outpacing the sales pace of the Wii in Japan. This is a moment that is going on with Nintendo. Yeah. Also, Nintendo of America announced at the end of 2017 that the Switch is now the fastest selling console in American history, with 4.8 million units sold in just 10 months. That outpaces everything, but also notable, outpacing the Wii, the PS2, the PS4, the Nintendo DS. That is incredible. We'll see if it holds true, but the PS4 started strong and has definitely held true.
Yeah.
all indications would be that the Nintendo Switch is a success, let us say.
Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting because I think the Nintendo Switch, a lot of Nintendo's systems that are really successful and have some gimmick to them do not then become a part of gaming overall. Like the Wii had, people tried to rip it off for like the Kinect and the PlayStation Move, but those went nowhere.
Yeah.
And now really the Wii's biggest legacy is like in VR stuff, but VR isn't going anywhere. So, that's interesting. No one else replicated the Nintendo DS's structure, all that. But the Switch is very much a replicatable thing. And I'm curious to see what impact that's going to have on the industry, especially because this is selling at numbers that third parties can't ignore. And Nintendo has been very good courting third-party developers, and those who have developed for Switch have seemingly found it a pretty easy and worthwhile experience, all of which means that I think the Switch could have a really big impact on the generation going forward.
Yeah, like I am curious to see like if Microsoft and Sony are interested in trying to like make another like a portable console hybrid, like that sort of concept, because this is kind of like two things that's interesting. Of like, one, it is the first time that concept has ever been executed like on this scale by a major video game developer and publisher, and it's been extremely successful. But then also, as far as I can think of, this is the only time a console has been launched in the middle of a console generation, quote unquote, and been successul at it. Because like that's what the Wii U was. The Wii U failed. Like the Dreamcast was that, and the Dreamcast failed like so much that sunk Sega as a hardware company. Like typically that strategy has never fucking worked. And I think like part of that, like it being this interesting middle space, gave it this opening to be able to sort of do that, and that it's not directly competing with Sony and Microsoft, because it's just not necessarily in the exact same space.
This is one of the most interesting things about it. It is clearly filling a niche that was not being catered to.
Yeah.
Or if it was being catered to in much narrower fashion, like portable only or something like that. And people wanted this thing. And like you look at Nintendo's data breakdowns also that we've seen of like most people do truly use it as a fusion console where they play it at home and they play it on the go roughly equally. Like they have the data on that. This was a gamble, but it's paid off incredibly well. It's a great system. It's kind of my favorite system to use these days. One, because it's just the fastest and easiest to play with, but also like it really does scratch an itch that I think a lot of gamers have wanted scratched for a very long time, and it did it. And I think it also, I think one of the biggest fallouts of the Switch going forward that I'm curious about is, it seems like Sony and Microsoft both got in this war over the last few years of like the way to stay relevant and gain more ground in the middle of a generation is more power, more graphics, the Pro version and the Xbox One X and all that. And the Switch comes in and is cleaning everyone's clock, and it's the most underpowered of these. And people who own a Switch don't give a shit about that. And like people buying a Switch don't give a shit about that.
Right.
And, Xbox is clawing for relevancy right now, and the only thing they have to give is 16 teraflops or whatever. I don't know the actual number of that, but whatever the number of teraflops. And it's like that, especially looking at the Switch this year, the Xbox One X could not look like a more tone deaf piece of hardware, I think. And same with like the PS4 Pro and a lot of this. And I just do wonder if this is going to reorient like, right, the thing that makes consoles and video game platforms successful is not the graphical prowess. That's a good thing, but it's more about how you tie that to accessibility. And that's what the Switch has shown. And I'm just curious how the rest of the industry reacts to that part of it, because that's a big test for that. Because the Pro and the Xbox One X have not really had mainstream penetration. The Switch very much has. And I'm curious about that.
Like one of the things I'm curious about is like the dynamics also of like having those other consoles on the market like gives the Switch its own niche of like that people who own a PS4 own an Xbox One. There's a reason to own a Switch in a way that there's not a reason to own the other one. Like there's no reason really to have an Xbox One
at all.
Yeah, basically, like right now, like there's just not, like, unless you're super hyped about getting Crackdown 3 or you are like a Forza fanboy, there's just nothing there. And so like having both of them of like you get to have Horizon Zero Dawn or whatever, like the games that are pushing the technological envelope and able to do things. If there's something like Assassin's Creed Origins that with that extra power is able to model all the interiors and stuff like that. And then also be able to have the Switch that has games that don't necessarily get to do those other things, but like not every game needs that, right? And like most games don't need that.
And all I'm not saying the technological prowess is bad. It's not. Like the PS4 is an amazing piece of hardware that is clearly very accessible to developers and has given us a lot of amazing experiences, but also plenty of the best games on PS4 use a fraction of that, like a Persona 5 or a Digimon Story or something like that.
Even like Nier Automata isn't like a next gen standout.
Yeah, like it probably couldn't run as well on Switch, but it'd be totally possible to probably get it running on Switch if you wanted to.
Yeah.
So I think that is an interesting dynamic. I just wonder if at the next E3 it would feel particularly tone deaf if we get another show from Microsoft about teraflops, because that is so not where the moment is. Like, you can have your technological prowess and that's great. It's clearly not the thing that sells hardware right now. Yeah. Xbox just seems to be floundering more every day. I've been playing it with Batman, and the new UI they've rolled out for the Xbox One X, which is also now on the old ones, it's really cool because somehow in its 4th year of existence, they made the Xbox One faster than it's ever been. I would love to know how they did that, because that's the opposite of the 360 and the PS4, which is so slow at this point.
Really?
On its
Mine's
UI.
fine.
Oh God, it's like moving everything's delayed on my PS4. Huh. I hear about that a lot.
Yeah, I feel like it was like that for mine for a while, and then there was some UI update like months ago that made it really fast for me.
Did not fix it for me, but anyway. So it's fast, but the Xbox One UI is also still, to me, too cluttered. Yeah. There's ads everywhere, and there's just it's so glitchy. Like, my brother is laughing at me for this because about half the time I go back into one of the Batman games, from Suspend, nothing will work. It just doesn't read the controller. I turn the controller off and on, it won't do it, and I have to just restart the whole console. It's nuts. There's a lot of issues like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's just my little rant about the Xbox. Also, the only game we know for sure that's coming out that's an Xbox exclusive this year is Sea of Thieves, and we don't know if it's going to be good. So
and but thinking about what they've managed to do to get it faster, maybe part of it is just they have so thoroughly killed off the Kinect now that they're not even selling the fucking dongle anymore.
I know.
To adapt it to the Kinect port to USB, because they took out the native Kinect port on the Xbox One S. They kept it off for the X, and now they're not even selling the fucking dongle anymore. So they're basically fully abandoned the Kinect.
To be nice to Xbox for a moment, because we're way off topic now, but I'll just finish this section being nice to Xbox for a moment. The backwards compatibility stuff is cool and is industry leading at the moment.
Yeah.
And is a very nice bonus. There's a lot, I love that they have improved it so much. I just wish they could, the thing that matters is the games, and they need to get that in line.
Yeah.
We have not heard a peep out of 343 or Halo in years,
I was thinking
and
about that.
Not a good sign.
I just had this weird moment when I was on my cruise of I just had this moment of
what
Halo
happened?
6. What happened to Halo? Wait a minute. It's been... Because Halo 5 came out in 2015, and it has been since Halo 1, every 3 years, a new mainline Halo game has come out. It's what? This is 2018. This year is 3 years since Halo 5, and we haven't heard anything.
I was talking to my brother about this. I think part of it, why it's been so quiet, is this one's going to have to also be on PC because of Play Anywhere.
That's true.
That's going to throw so many wrenches in that development process.
Yeah.
Because Halo is this game that has been iterating since 2001 and not on PC.
Yeah.
Anyway, and one other thing I want to praise is that Xbox, while it has my least favorite of the current gen controllers, and I know a lot of people love it, and it is a good controller.
It's a totally fine
controller. It's just it's a personal preference. That's all. It's still
I don't like their weird sticks. Their sticks don't do it for me.
But it is a good controller. Their custom controller game has been on point. So much so, I have pre-ordered this, Sean.
God damn it, Jonathan.
Sean, look at this thing. I have the picture. This is the Sea of Thieves custom controller. It is purple translucent. It has a skull and crossbones. It has green dust all over it. And the left control stick has a northeast-southwest compass around it. I need that. It looks so cool.
God damn it, Jonathan. What's wrong with you?
I never buy myself custom controllers. This one looks so neat.
I feel like this is the third fucking time we've talked about, I feel like I've talked you out of buying custom controllers on the Xbox One 2 times already. Because Because, like, half the time on the podcast we talk about the Xbox One, the thing you say is, oh, I haven't played that in like months.
I know! I don't need it! And I can cancel the pre-order. It's Amazon. But it's just like, for now, because it's actually sold out now everywhere, I just want that. It looks so cool, because they never make cool controllers for anything else. Xbox is the only person that still does it.
Because it's your money. You can buy it if you want. I just don't think it's the smartest purchase in the world.
Sean, it's a dumbass purchase, but it's so cool, and it's the one thing they've got.
Just think of something else you could buy with that money that would be more valuable to you, because there has got to be hundreds of
the actual game Sea of Thieves.
There's that, yes.
Anyway, we'll resume that conversation in February when the controller comes out, and whether or not I have gotten it.
Okay.
Anyway, maybe I'll sell some blood. All right.
We talked about news somewhere in there.
All right. Anyway, you want to move on to Doctor Who?
I think it's time for us to talk about Doctor Who, John.
All right. Before we talk about Twice Upon a Time,
okay, yeah.
quickly, can we check in with my classic Who rewatch?
Yeah,
not a rewatch for me.
Yes,
just a watch.
But I mean, we need to check in with me a little bit on that too.
Oh, I'm excited to hear about this. I'll go first really quick.
Okay, yeah.
When last we left, I had finished the Fourth Doctor's first season, plus Terror of the Zygons, which feels like it's part of that first season.
Which is basically part of that season, yeah.
Now, then I had to take a long break for all these movies I was watching, and I really just... Doctor Who was beckoning, but I couldn't go down that rabbit hole, or else I wouldn't finish watching, Hostiles and The Post and I, Tonya and stuff. Anyway, all good movies, not as good as Doctor Who. Few things are. So I just finished today, actually, Doctor Who Season 13, which is his second season, which ends with the story The Seeds of Doom, which... If it didn't air in the same season as Pyramids of Mars and The Brain of Morbius and Terror of the Zygons and Planet of Evil and all these great stories, we would say, man, that's a fucking Doctor Who masterpiece right there. Mm-hmm. But it's up against some real fucking masterpieces. Sean, this era of Doctor Who is insane.
I feel like maybe you've heard this sentiment somewhere before. That maybe someone on this podcast has said numerous times that that's maybe the most creatively fertile period in the history of the show.
It's so good, Sean. Because this is also the season where they really start, Hinchcliffe and Holmes really start asserting the horror side of it.
Yeah, because that's when they had full control was in their second season.
And there's something about these stories, Pyramids of Mars and Brain of Morbius and Seeds of Doom. They're not just great, accomplished stories. They're not just great, accomplished pieces of filmmaking, which they also are and isn't talked about enough. Because everyone's like, lol, classic Who kind of looks low rent. I don't think so for this era. I think it's really good filmmaking. I think their shot choices are amazing. I think the acting is amazing. I think the set design. There's a serial called Planet of Evil that is one of the most visually striking TV things I've ever seen. That the set in that episode is off the fucking charts.
Planet of Evil, the first Leela story?
No, that's Face of Evil.
Okay, yes.
And
the getting all the titles straight is very hard.
Planet of Evil is the one with... God, it's hard to describe. It's one of the... In its just story description, it sounds like a million other stories where they land on a planet and there's an evil thing infecting people and the scientists won't believe the doctor. Okay. But it's one of those.
Yes, I think I know
it's
what you're
the
talking
one
about.
with the antimatter that's coming from a big hole.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's really cool. Anyway.
Good.
Yeah, but so not only is all that, there is something that even today, 40 plus years on, feels actively dangerous about this era of Doctor Who. And it's because they were actively playing with fire. Yeah. Both in the sense that they were using way more fire on the BBC sound stages than they were supposed to. Like in The Brain of Morbius. If you watch, I have the DVDs of these, and there's the subtitle track with trivia that's really cool. They had to get so many permits for all those torches in Brain of Morbius. And they still had to do some of it on the down low. And they had to do 2 takes of the Doctor being burned at the stake, because in the first, the fire got out of control, and the woman playing the Sisterhood of Karn leader had to yell at Tom Baker, "Tom, get off! It's gonna kill you!" And Tom Baker had to jump out of the way of the fire. So that's one way they were playing with fire. But also they were...
You mean Tom Baker had to pretend to get out of the way because, as we all know, he's immortal and fire has no effect on him.
Yes, he had to keep up the illusion. Yeah. No. But yeah, there's that thing that feels like they're playing with fire. But also, the horror elements are so grotesque and intense. And they just get increasingly violent. And, to the point where the finale, Seeds of Doom... There's a scene where, they throw someone through a compost unit, and, the villain in that episode dies getting ground in compost like fucking Sweeney Todd. It's insane how dark it is. And, they were constantly getting called out by Mary Whitehouse, who was, the equivalent of Sarah Palin or something in Britain back in the day, some idiot conservative, and like the BBC was getting madder and madder at them. And I didn't even know this, but I learned from the bonus features. And Philip Hinchcliffe was basically fired after that last season, where they were just like, I guess it was The Deadly Assassin was the last straw, and which I haven't seen yet, but I'm excited to because I've heard what happens. And they pushed him to another show and brought Graham Williams on and said, no more of that. Yeah. And it's like, and that began the slow downfall of Doctor Who, where the BBC stopped trusting the show, which would, after another decade or so, lead to its demise. Like, the things that happened in this era of Doctor Who literally dictated Doctor Who's future for the rest of that century. Mm-hmm. It's and you can feel it in the stories, because even if some of this stuff, if you put it on TV today, would feel out there. Like that scene in The Brain of Morbius where Kondo gets shot and the brain falls out of the casing and he's like scooping it up, like
if you adjust it to like how that would be depicted on like modern Doctor Who couldn't do that scene.
No, they would never do that scene.
You couldn't, like, because especially like it would be so fucking gross with modern effects and like what you would expect of that. Sort of like you adjust your perspective to how that would have looked relative to everything else that you would have been watching in the like mid to early 70s. That would be it. That would be intense.
But, the art is amazing. Sean, in these just 2 seasons I'm in so far with Tom Baker.
Yes.
Ark in Space. Genesis of the Daleks. Pyramids of Mars. Brain of Morbius. Can you choose what's the best of those?
No.
No, it's really hard. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, and now you understand my conundrum in picking a story for the Doctor Who, the special podcast we do. That those were basically the 4 I was looking at for the first half of the Fourth Doctor era, because I needed to pick something that had Sarah Jane in it. And it's like Ark in Space doesn't work because it's his first story, or it's not his first story, but it's basically one of his first stories that I didn't want to. And also knowing that you were watching through it, I didn't want you to see that one yet. And then Genesis of the Daleks is amazing, but it's also so tied to Dalek stuff that feels like I can't pick that as being the typical Fourth Doctor story. So it's down to Brandon Morbius and Pyramid of Mars, which I was Pyramid of Mars for most of it, and then switched to Brandon Morbius at the last second because I couldn't decide. I was like, I'm just going to go with that one.
I think you were dead on, not necessarily in the sense that it's the best. I don't know which one is the best. Yeah. It is both representative, but also so batshit crazy. It's just so notable. But Pyramids of Mars... Oh my God, there's nothing else. The 4th episode of Pyramids of Mars.
All the stuff with Sutek in the last episode is so fucking good. And all like the cool puzzle shit they have to do.
I loved it. I loved it so much. And of course, all this comes back to Tom Baker. Tom Baker's Doctor, Sean. This goes beyond he's my new favorite Doctor. That might be my favorite performance of any character in history. It is I am so in love with this man. It is such an amazing performance. He makes me hurt with laughter in so much of what he does, in just little things. Like, in the one I was watching today, The Seeds of Doom, there's this part where he's going into a government building, and I bet Tom Baker, planned this whole thing where there's these 2, shrubberies in front of the building, and instead of walking around them, he jumps up onto them, onto the dirt, and then jumps off. And it's like, I don't think the director came up with that. I think Tom Baker was like, can you move those shrubs from there to here? So can you move those shrubs from here to there so I may jump on them? Or something like that. It's amazing.
And it's just, he's smiling, he has that crazy look in his eyes. You're like, yes, Mr. Baker, okay, don't kill me.
And I think there's a really fascinating thing about the Hinchcliffe-Holmes era where, typically you would think, okay, really dark Doctor Who stories, really grotesque stuff, you wouldn't pair that with the funniest, silliest Doctor, but there's something about Tom Baker that animates those stories.
Yeah.
In part because I think he adds levity to stories that need it in places, but also because he can turn on a fucking dime and take that weird alien energy that is funny in some places and make it terrifying and immediate in other places. Where, there's a lot of, the Doctor just kind of blusters around with people and makes light of things when they're threatening him, but when he gets angry, you know it. And the range Tom Baker shows in these is also amazing.
Yeah.
He just, again, he is an alien. He is from outer space. He came to Earth to play Doctor Who and then hung around for a while. And it's amazing.
Yeah. And it's like that era is where they do really start leaning into the alienness of the Doctor, which is something I think successive Doctor Who picks up on and takes a lot from. Because I'm just thinking about, there's that scene right at the beginning of Pyramid of Mars with I think it's at the beginning of Pyramid of Mars, of the Doctor in the TARDIS. He's just standing in the middle of the TARDIS with his hands in his pockets, sort of like looking down with his hat on, and he's just sort of because one of the best things about Tom Baker that I think people don't talk about a lot is most of his stories open with him moping about something.
It really
he's
does.
Always he's just moping and angry and fresh. Like whenever he's on Earth, he hates being on Earth. He's constantly being jerked around by the Time Lords, and he hates that. He's always moping, and so he's just standing in the middle of the TARDIS, and he starts just sort of like soliloquying about what it is like being a Time Lord, and Sarah Jane comes in and is like, oh, I know you're a Time Lord. It's like, no, you don't understand, Sarah Jane. You don't understand what it means to walk in eternity, and like stuff like that. And it's stuff that like no Doctor before him had kind of like portrayed that alienness in that way that feels like very much that later Doctor Who picks up on that, and that sensibility.
Yep, and it is Pyramids of Mars. And if I were to make the argument for the four I named that Pyramids of Mars is my favorite, it's because of what it does with Tom Baker. It's that scene. There's one in, I think, the third episode where Sarah Jane asks a question you would think companions would ask more often, which is, we're back in the TARDIS, why don't we just leave? And he says, Sarah, you don't understand. You know, we have a duty. And she says, no, just let's go to 1980. I'm from 1980. The future's not going to be fucked. And he's like, okay, and goes to 1980 and opens the door, and it's just chaos outside, and he gives this speech. Right. It's amazing, and it's a true, like, I think, defining Doctor Who moment, and it's also insane and funny because it's Tom Baker. It's an amazing, amazing performance, and like, yeah, Doctor Who, you can tell how much of like our modern Who sensibilities are being forged in his performance.
Yeah.
I love it so much. But what's your classic Who thing to tell us about?
So after watching Twice Upon a Time, I was, for like reasons we'll get into, like seized by this urge to watch First Doctor stuff. So I'm halfway through the Daleks. I've
nice.
watched all of An Unearthly Child / 100,000 BC. However, you fall on the argument about what you refer to that serial as. And then I'm now like deep into the Daleks, and turns out William Hartnell's really fucking good. Those stories are really fucking good, Jonathan.
Yeah, we've talked about it. Those first four Doctors, not to insult anyone else, just they hit those four out of the park so hard. It really is an incredible progression.
Yeah, and it's just fucking, man, it's so Doctor Who's really fucking good.
Because I should say,
it's been a while since I've watched some of those.
Yeah,
it's very good.
I have not watched all of William Hartnell in order, obviously, but like the week before Christmas, I did watch The 10th Planet with my brother, who had not seen Classic Who before. Not the best story to start Classic Who with, but he was kind of bored by it, which I get. It's
because also William Hartnell's not in that as much as he's in most of them.
The episode he's in the most is missing.
Yes,
we had the animated version, which is cool, but anyway, so I did thoroughly enjoy watching that. And almost went on to watch Power of the Daleks, and then I had movies to watch, so I'll get back to it.
Yeah, my favorite thing, though, about going back and watching the first story in particular, because, you know, you have An Unearthly Child, which is basically like a Twilight Zone episode in how, like, you know, the discovery of Doctor Who and all that, and that stuff is so amazing. And then I just love that this show that's been on for over 50 years, the first, like, real adventure they go on is all about this tribe of cavemen that are, like, it's basically like they're having an election, and there's a dispute over the election between Za, who is, like, basically the incumbent in a way that, like, he's the son of the old leader of the tribe, and then you have Cal, who's a foreigner to the tribe, who has come from a tribe from the mountains, and he has come in because his tribe died because they didn't have fire, and whoever makes the fire becomes the leader of the tribe. And it's just this great, weird fucking story that all, like, sometimes just feels like it's a pastiche of politics. I have no idea if Anthony Coburn, the writer, if that was his intention or not, but it does, like, especially after having, like, relatively recently gone through a very traumatizing election year, like, there's something about watching that story that was, like, it was even more interesting to me. But I always love this one line that Za gives, where he basically gets up on this big stone thing in the middle of his cave, in front of his tribe of cavemen, and he's giving this, like, speech about his, kind of like his platform against Cal, and he says this one thing that's like, Za does not lie to you, Za does not say he will do this thing and then not do it. And that's like his position, his political position, is that he does not say he will do this thing and then not do it. Which it's like every single political speech you have ever heard in a political campaign, but it's filtered through like caveman speech, and there's something so fucking amazing about it. And it's also the first Doctor Who's adventure. It's the first one, After they leave, it's the first time like the TARDIS lands anywhere. It's the first time the TARDIS like is stuck as a police box that the Doctor has to be like, it's still a police box. What's going on? Like all of that stuff is framed by caveman politics, and it's the most beautiful thing ever.
There's something about William Hartnell's portrayal that feels like that is how he would fuck with Barbara and Ian, would be to take, that's where he would take them first.
Yeah. Well, but he doesn't even try
I know
to
he doesn't,
because he can't do it on purpose. Because that's the other thing of like, you know, the first Doctor kidnaps Ian and Barbara against their will, and then in the second story of the Daleks, everyone's like, we can't go check out that crazy city on this dead planet. Like the first episode of the Daleks is called The Dead Planet. They land in this forest that is like everything is dead. It's all like petrified wood and all this shit because there was the nuclear war and all this stuff that you get into in Genesis of the Daleks fleshes it out. And they're like, Doctor, we can't go there. This is crazy. We can't go there just to satisfy your weird scientific curiosity. And so the Doctor eventually like concedes, and they go back into this TARDIS, and then he takes out the fluid link in the TARDIS console and pretends like the TARDIS can't take off, and says like, well, we got to refill the fluid link with mercury, so I guess we gotta go back to the city. And they go back to the city and, of course, get captured by the Daleks and all this shit. It's, like, entirely the Doctor's petty arrogance of just, like... Because also, like, the fluid link doesn't even need mercury. It's like, there's this great line where the Doctor's just like, what do you mean? Oh, wait, no, actually, yeah, here, Chesterton, it's totally fine. It's like... It's so good. Old Doctor Who's very good, is the point.
Let's talk about an episode of Doctor Who that mixes the old and the new and the future.
Yes.
Sean, for the last time on the Weekly Stuff podcast, we get to talk about, at least as it's current, the Peter Capaldi and Steven Moffat eras of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
With Twice Upon a Time. So, Sean, I saw this episode twice on Christmas Day because I watched it by myself and then I watched it with my brother.
Yeah.
And it made me cry both times. And I found it beautiful. And I think this episode is perfect, even if in its minor imperfections. And I think I cannot imagine a better close to this era. What do you think?
Yeah, I've watched it 3 times now, and like I've basically watched it 4 times because there's a bunch of scenes that I've just watched over and over and over again.
Oh, I've seen the regeneration scene like 10 times.
Yeah, and then just like a bunch of the other select moments of like the first Doctor talking to Bill and stuff like that. I've just watched over and over again, and it is, for me, yeah, I think it is one of the best regeneration stories. Easily, I think it's the best. I think it's probably the second best regeneration story off the top of my head. Like, it's Caves of Androzani is obviously
number one.
It would take a Heaven Sent caliber story to topple Caves of Androzani in any way. But this is, to me, it's the best regeneration story of new Doctor Who. It's just because one of the things it does, because it does so much. I think it handles the first Doctor in a way that is really impressive, and I didn't realize that this is the way I would have them do it, but it is exactly the way it needs to be done, of like keeping, because again, like I just rewatched An Unearthly Child, and the first Doctor straight up just has a line about like the Red Indian and within his savage mind, right? So it's like people saying that like it's overblown. No, it's like the way the first Doctor acts with like his weird arrogance and pettiness and like sexism and stuff. That is like a product of the 60s mindset that all those characters were written in. And it kind of like, if you're going to represent him, it needs to be there in some way. Like, I think to be kind of like honest to the show's history. And so like stuff like that of handling the first Doctor that way, obviously Peter Capaldi is just amazing. And particularly the last like 10 minutes or so of this episode showcases him at his absolute finest. I think everything they do with like the World War I soldier and the World War I battlefield and the sort of the Christmas element, like that's fucking perfect. But above all, I love that this is a Doctor Who story, unlike anything we've seen for like 40 years or something, that doesn't feel compelled to have a giant ridiculous plot. That doesn't need to be over the top. It doesn't need to have this huge like galaxy-ending threat. It doesn't need to have like this evil monster. It does still have a monster. We've not gotten so far that we can have a story that doesn't have a monster yet. One day we will get back there. One day we will get back. But for now, I will take that like this recognition that Doctor Who doesn't need to do that, because the beautiful thing about Doctor Who is a show that can do anything. And unfortunately, most of the time, writers don't take that and realize that also means that an episode that doesn't need to have a threat. It can just be a normal story and just deal with character issues and themes and not have to have a big enemy threat. And this episode does that. And that's the perfect way, I think, to have the 12th Doctor bow out.
I agree. I did rank this with the other Steven Moffat ones in my written version of the list that went out on jonathanleck.com in 4 parts. And because I was publishing starting the day after Christmas, I had to write my blurb for for Twice Upon a Time very quickly, and I did it on Christmas Day after watching the episode, and so it was very hard to rank for me. I will say I put it at like number 17 or something, right under Time of the Doctor. So Time of the Doctor was one higher, the Matt Smith final episode, and my logic was kind of like, if you kind of split the difference that The Doctor Falls is like half of the regeneration story and Time of the Doctor is a full, like that was kind of my logic at the time, but I also was trying to fight recency bias. With 2 weeks now to think on it, I think I would rank it significantly higher, and I agree with you that I think it's the best regeneration story in modern Who. One of the things that I actually think is useful in talking about it, and spoilers from here on out, if for some reason you haven't seen it, I mean, if you didn't watch the Christmas special on Christmas Day, what's wrong with you? But were you able to on the ship?
No,
okay.
I had to wait. So it was something of where, like, at first I was like, oh God, I'm going to have to desperately avoid spoilers. And then I realized, wait, the exact reason why I can't watch the episode right now also means that luckily spoilers are not even a thing because I'm cut off from the
internet. Okay, you had a good excuse for not seeing it. But yeah, anyway.
I saw it in my heart
on
Christmas Day.
No.
It wasn't Christmas Day to me until I got back and was able to watch it.
Yes, no, I know. But anyway, what was I saying?
I don't know. Something about people watching on Christmas Day.
It was spoilers, blah, blah, blah. What I was going to say is that I think it's really instructive to compare the final line of Peter Capaldi to the final line of David Tennant. Because the final line of David Tennant is also the final line of Russell T Davies.
Yeah.
And it is a similar moment in Doctor Who history where one showrunner and one doctor signed off and left, another one came in, and we have the exact same scenario here where Chris Chibnall decided, we're going to one-up the explosion from last time, and we're going to really beat this fucker up with the TARDIS, beat the TARDIS up.
Like, he was like, anyone hoping that we're going to keep this amazing TARDIS set? Fuck you, because we're blowing it all to hell. It's like, I get your urge to have something new, but it's so good. God damn it.
Did you see the YouTube thing
where they broke it down in the time lapse?
No, I was going to talk about the after show, the fan show.
Yes, I watched that also.
It's really, Steven Moffat has a great interview there where he says, like, he was talking to Chris. He said, all right, Chris, what do you want me to do with the TARDIS once he regenerates? It's a great set. You probably want to keep it. And Steven Moffat does this whole like fake conversation between him and Chris where he's like, all right, we'll blow it up. We'll blow it. If we're going to do it, we're going to do it good. We're going to blow it up. Anyway,
it's a great set, but we're going to blow it up. Yeah.
It's very funny. But anyway, what I was going to say is that, David Tennant's last line is, I don't want to go.
Yeah.
And I think it's a beautiful and honest, definitely an honest line for the character in that moment. It is also a line that is not particularly magnanimous to the future of Doctor Who.
Yes, especially when it's David Tennant, who was like, for new Doctor Who, was the Doctor, because Christopher Eccleston had only been on for a year. David Tennant had been for 3 years, and he's a very attractive man.
Yes, he's the Tumblr Doctor. I love David Tennant.
True.
You guys know I love David Tennant.
He's very sexy.
I love him in more ways than one. But compare that to Peter Capaldi and Steven Moffat's last line. Laugh hard, run fast, be kind. Doctor, I let you go. And that sentiment that broke the waterworks for me.
Yeah.
Because it is such a gesture to the future. And that whole final scene is a gesture to the future. And everything this episode does in looking to the past is a gesture to the future and saying, here is why Doctor Who has had longevity. And let us send this out with saying why Doctor Who should continue to have longevity. And that is such a magnanimous closing. It's etched on Capaldi's face, and you can feel Steven Moffat in the line of saying, I love this thing so much, and I love it so much that I give it to you.
Yeah.
And that's what Doctor Who needs to continue. And I think that last line puts the whole episode in context, because that's what it's building to, is how do you let go of the Doctor? And Twice Upon a Time is very much a Steven Moffat episode in so many ways, partially in that it's very, very meta.
Yeah.
And Moffat loves the meta, and I understand people get, frustrated with that sometimes. But it's also worth remembering Doctor Who is 54 years old now, 55 in 2018.
Yeah.
It's an old-ass show. It is almost half as old as cinema itself. Like, keep that in mind. There are moments where I think you have to be reflexive and grapple with the legacy of this amazing thing you've been handed. And I think maybe more than any other episode of his tenure, the way this grapples with legacy and hands off that legacy is a beautiful thing within the text of the show and within the meta text of the show.
Yeah, exactly. The thing the episode does that makes that work is that there's both levels to it. Like, especially that line, "Doctor, I let you go." There's so many layers to how you kind of like can approach that line and interpret that line that it works on that meta level, but just also in like the core text of like what is happening in the story, particularly as a summation of the journey that the 12th Doctor has gone on from Series 8 to Twice Upon a Time, that we've seen this version of this character grow and evolve and change more dramatically than any individual incarnation of the Doctor ever has, like by a large amount, I think. And culminating that is so important, and I think like getting to that spot where he has learned all these things and maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves of like talking too much about the regeneration scene, but just like coming from this place of not knowing who he was and this place of sort of like vulnerability and uncertainty to ending his time giving a lecture to his success, to his like imagined successor, whoever the next Doctor is, but not like the actor, but like literally just within the show, him giving a lecture to his future self. That's like who the 12th Doctor is, and it was such a smart, beautiful way to take that full circle, is that like not only has he learned who he is, which I think is kind of like what he does by the end of like season 9 and sort of like Husbands of River Song, but the course of like season 10 is him learning to excel at who he is and pass it on and evolve it, and it's, you know, it's him teaching Missy who he is, and him teaching Bill who he is, and him teaching Dark who he is.
And also an important thread that is finished here in Twice Upon a Time is forgiving himself for the things he can't fix.
Yeah.
Because, yes, he comes to a sense of identity at the end of season 9, and then what he has to learn in season 10 is that doesn't fix everything. That doesn't make you flawless. That doesn't fix the world around you. That doesn't mean you and the people you love won't be hurt. But he has to say, you know, at the end of The Doctor Falls, he's at this point of nihilism of saying, I just want to end it. I can't do this again. I can't learn this again. I can't hurt like this again. And I think going from that point to where we end Twice Upon a Time in the course of just that 1 hour is a beautiful journey, and it's representative of a 3-season journey, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, I totally agree, and we'll talk when at the end of this, we're going to have to send Mr. Capaldi off and summarize that, and I agree, no other Doctor has had this kind of concentrated arc. As many people have pointed out, you know, episode 2 of Capaldi, Into the Dalek, Clara, be a pal and tell me, am I a good man? Final line, be kind.
Yeah.
Like, that's a journey, and if you've seen the whole thing in between, it's an organic journey with lots of movement in between. It's not anything they pay lip service to.
Yeah.
It is real and felt and genuine, and, you know, I remember this time last year, you and I were on the podcast so sad that Capaldi was leaving, but now it's like, everyone has to go. Those 3 seasons, that's about the most perfect run a Doctor could have.
Yeah.
Couple of lackluster episodes, a lot of masterpieces, and again, a sense of genuine artistic, creative, and thematic movement for the show.
I mean, and just particularly his last 3 episodes are...
Oh my god.
Fucking just utterly, like, which are kind of like a trilogy in a way,
yes.
from World Enough in Time to this.
Yeah, because it is, I do kind of...
outstanding.
It is kind of hard to say Twice Upon a Time on its own. I know it's the episode in which he regenerates, but obviously, like, the death blow is not dealt in this episode.
Right, yeah.
Like, The Doctor Falls and World Enough in Time are part of the regeneration story, certainly at least in a thematic sense.
Yeah.
It's also amazing, so much of the 12th Doctor's run happened by accident and, like, coincidence, that, like, Clara almost didn't come back for Series 9, which you couldn't have done any of Series 9 without Clara.
Yeah.
And, like, Series 10 was this thing where, like, they weren't sure if Moffat was going to stay, and then it was like, Chibnall can't do it until 2018, so like, okay, we'll do 1 season in those 2 years, and then Twice Upon a Time itself almost didn't happen, because Moffat was only, and Capaldi were only contracted through the end of Series 10, and then Chibnall decided, I actually don't want to introduce a Doctor in a Christmas special, so they're like, fuck, we have to make a Christmas special, and I guess The Doctor Falls had been written at one point just as a regeneration. I would love to know what the hell that looked like, because I don't know how you resolve that story with him popping, you know, like, it's crazy.
But I think that's like one of the things that makes this episode work so much and makes it the best regeneration episode, is that every other regeneration episode has had to like cram stuff in some way. That is like, you know, the Ninth Doctor one, it's like you have to just kind of like slap that regeneration at the end. It is like, it works for that story, but it still feels like if this was planned more, you would do more with it. And the same thing with like the 10th Doctor. For the 10th Doctor is that first episode of End of Time is not good. So it's like they waste a lot of the time they have. And so by the time it gets to the regeneration, like it's still good.
Well, and David Tennant spent 3 calendar years, 2008, 9, and 10, moping about his regeneration.
Yeah.
It's not that many episodes, but they aired over 3 years.
Yeah. So it is just like, it feels like you could do more with this. It's like you could pace this better. And then by the time you get to like Time of the Doctor, which like I love that episode, but it is still like you can tell that this was supposed to basically be a season, or at least half of a season of Doctor Who on Trinzalore or something. Because and it's a like minor miracle that episode even works, let alone that it's fantastic. But it's still like it needs that extra bit of pacing that it doesn't quite have to fully unpack everything that it's dealing with, because it has to deal with all these big plot ideas and like this rising action and climaxes and blah blah blah, like all that kind of like stuff you need to build the threat in like an action adventure type story, which is basically every single modern Doctor Who story is. Like, even if they're trying to do like a soulful character thing like with Dr. Vincent and the Doctor, they still have to make it an action adventure story because they couldn't, whatever, BBC or something, like they don't trust themselves with just having it be like this small character thing. Here there is technically a monster with the Testament, but it's like the plot structure is not that at all. Like the plot structure is not the plot structure of an action adventure story at all.
No, and I think it speaks to also some of the limitations of the format of Modern Who that I hope Chibnall takes some lessons from where Moffat took the series structurally and some of the explorations of how do we break out of the just single 45-minute stories mold. Yeah. Because like one of the reasons Caves of Androzani is the best regeneration story, both just the quality of the storytelling and the filmmaking and all that, but being a 4-part serial, the Doctor has the room to go on a journey through that episode. Yeah. And it's not all he's not like reflexively in every episode worrying about his death. But, by the time you get to Caves of Androzani 3 and he's, barreling the ship towards Earth, like, you feel the weight of a journey just within that story. Yeah. And I can say that without having seen any other Fifth Doctor stuff. You feel that. It's hard to do that in Modern Who because you don't have that kind of space. Yeah. And I think this being essentially a 3-parter, which would translate to 6 episodes of Classic Who, boy, the 12 got to go on a journey over these last 3. Yeah. And Twice Upon a Time being teed up to just be this little, basically four-hander of that is basically a long philosophical conversation between its characters. It's just beautiful. Yeah. So, Sean, let's start at the beginning. Okay. Because this episode goes back a ways. How happy were you with previously on Doctor Who 800 episodes ago?
Yeah, it's like, I love all that stuff of how they handle that, and like, I think that's the right way to handle the transitions of like from like footage from the 10th planet to like transitioning into David Bradley, and like they do that again near the end, and they showed like they showed the regeneration from like the original regeneration from William Hartnell to Patrick Stroud, which luckily we have that footage. We have those like 5 seconds or whatever it is of footage from that episode. But yeah, I think it does a lot to help contextualize things. I think it kind of tees them up for the version of the First Doctor they're doing, which is an interesting sort of amalgamation of who the First Doctor is all across his run, but then also like keeping him like quote unquote historically accurate in a lot of ways, and remembering that he is a character from the 60s, and so who he was and like a lot of his character traits and his lines and stuff like that are absolutely 100% colored by the attitudes and culture of Britain in the 1960s that created that character. And there's something about like framing it directly in that way that I think sets you up for that.
But framing it also within, because I think that all that stuff I agree is actually very smart and I think very essential both metatextually and thematically to show that, how do you show David Bradley as a younger man than Peter Capaldi? You do that. Like, you show that he hasn't journeyed across the universe and seen the things that make him the man he is and the woman he's going to become, you know, like all these things. But there is the flip side of that is the warmth and the specific, I think, like paternal vibe that David Bradley operates on and William Hartnell operated on in playing the First Doctor in that, it's not something that I think was critically interrogated at the time, but there's the different, paternalism has good and bad sides to it. And I like that it's here. It's not a glorification of the First Doctor, but it is a celebration of him in all the shades of gray.
Yeah.
And that's what matters. And good God, is David Bradley good in this?
Yes, it's frightening at times. Like particularly just like the physical appearance. Like some of those transitions are so striking. But let's just do that. Like, let's just talk about the First Doctor in this and David Bradley, because it is like it's so amazing that you've already got such a fucking huge writing challenge in front of you of writing the exit of this like larger than life character of the 12th Doctor and doing the regeneration and setting up the future and all that stuff. And then on top of that, it's like, well, let's recast the First Doctor, which luckily they had a good, very great vector to do so. So let's recast him again and then put him in this and like have to write for that character and try to recreate that character, recreate the set for that character, the costumes, the behavior, and contrast that with modern Doctor Who, which there is a significant contrast in a lot of ways. Like, that's such a huge thing to tackle with in a regeneration story. And then luckily, like, that having it be him right on the verge of his first regeneration at the end of the 10th planet gives you this like really powerful thematic way of connecting those two ideas. But yeah, like David Bradley does what I think is like the smartest choice in trying to sort of inhabit the character of the First Doctor, is that he's not doing an impersonation of William Hartnell. Like, particularly, he's not trying to do the like William Hartnell's voice or something like that. Like, he sounds like David Bradley. He's not trying to do that, all that stuff. He doesn't even necessarily like impersonate all the mannerisms and like quirks of the First Doctor. Like, there are some things he does of like turn his head in a way, or he holds the lapels and stuff like that. But there's a lot, but he doesn't do the like kind of stuff. He doesn't flub his lines. Like, it's not like a caricature or impersonation in that way. Instead, it feels like he's taking a lot of like the essence of who the First Doctor was and riffing on it and sort of doing his own spin on it. And that's the right way to do it.
He's giving a performance.
Yes, exactly.
Like David Bradley is one of our best actors in the world, and he's just given a performance, and he's so good at it. I also think one of the strengths of the portrayal of the First Doctor in this episode on the whole is that it would be very easy for Steven Moffat to just go full indulgent on this and make it just for classic Who fans or something. But that the Venn diagram of people who are still watching modern Doctor Who and have enough familiarity with the first fucking Doctor from the 60s to really get all that is pretty small. Two of those people are here on this podcast. But like, my brother, for instance, the only First Doctor thing he'd seen was the stuff from the movie An Adventure in Space and Time, and The 10th Planet, which does not give you a good sense of who the First Doctor is.
Yeah.
And he came away from Twice Upon a Time loving that character so fucking much, and David Bradley's portrayal, that he turned to me when it was done and said, "Do you think that audiobook site is doing anything with him?" And I said, I kind of joked, I'm like, they do it for everyone, probably. And I opened my computer and went to the Big Finish website, and they already have. Yeah. There's already a box set with David Bradley as the First Doctor, and I haven't bought it yet, but I will. And my brother is also excited to listen to it, and he has not asked about Big Finish before, so that's just kind of funny. And that just shows that it works. Like, you don't have to have seen William Hartnell to get this, but if you have, there's an extra layer of resonance, and that's how it should work. Yeah. That I think this episode is 100% accessible if you've only seen Modern Who. Or if you've only seen the 12th Doctor, or 11 and 12, wherever you've come in, Doctor Who should eternally be accessible to newbies. And it is. But then there is that extra layer of poignancy. But yeah, David Bradley is just, he is one of, weirdly in that he never really plays the main character of things. He's a main character here, Yeah. He's one of like these defining actors of my life, I think in part because he's in the Harry Potter movies, and so I saw him at a young age. And then, after Harry, he basically had this kind of small career before Harry Potter, and then since then I think people realized this is a special talent here and have used him in so many interesting roles here and there. I think one of the most significant being Broadchurch. Yeah. A lot of actors from Broadchurch we mentioned on Doctor Who. Yeah. Including another future Doctor, Jodie Whittaker.
That's right. There are now 3 Doctors in Broadchurch and at least 1 companion.
Yes. And again, Olivia Colman, I think, will probably play the Doctor one day. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah, like, I think in the first season of Broadchurch, you really saw what he could fully do when given the chance, and he's continued doing those things. the performance he gives in An Adventure in Space and Time, not as the Doctor, but as William Hartnell the Man, is a tearjerker in the best way possible. I rewatched it before the Christmas special, and there's that scene where he breaks down at the fireplace with his wife after he's forced off Doctor Who, and he cries, I don't want to go. And it's like, on paper, I don't know if that line should work because of how it quotes David Tennant.
Right, yeah.
Oh, God, it works. It works so well. And then you get here, and I agree with everything you said. It's got elements, obviously, of William Hartnell. It's a very respectful performance, but it's him making the character his own, and that's what you need to do. And what that means is that he embodies the spirit of the First Doctor more than any impersonation could, in the warmth, in the prickliness, in the political incorrectness, but also in the sense that, this is a deeply, deeply good man at his core.
But he doesn't like showing it all the time.
He doesn't like showing it, and he doesn't quite know how to express it yet.
Yeah.
And I think, as a show, again, grappling with legacy, this is the 54th year of Doctor Who, looking back at it and saying, look at where this man started, look at where he is now, look at where she will go. And I think this is such a beautiful way to do that. And, if they didn't have a David Bradley, you could never tell this story.
Yeah.
And, also full credit to Steven Moffat, he can write any fucking Doctor. He's proven it.
Yes, he's written for a lot of them now. I don't remember, Jonathan, have you seen the 5 Doctors yet, that special?
I have not. Are you telling me that he's better than Richard Herndal?
With it's just, we'll have. I'm excited for you to get to the 5 Doctors.
The pause on the waveforms when I asked you that question is damning. It's literally silent.
It's very good. Yeah, so I'm excited for you to, as you get deep into the 5th Doctor run, that you can watch the 5 Doctors because there's something that I had kind of forgotten about until after Twice Upon a Time, and then it occurred to me because I was thinking about this idea of recasting the Doctor, which it's such a bold idea. It's I can't luckily they had An Adventure in Space and Time serves this incredible function of making it feel okay, it's they did their due diligence, and David Bradley did the work, and he's earned the right to actually play the full character. And then I realized wait, also he's the 3rd person to play Doctor Who in the TV show of Doctor Who, or he's the first Doctor Who who's credited as Doctor Who. It's obviously it was William Hartnell. But then, for those who don't know, for the 20th, the 20th anniversary of the show, in the 5th Doctor era, they did the 5 Doctors special, which features Peter Davison as the 5th Doctor. It features a short clip from Shada of the 4th Doctor getting abducted by a weird time thing while he's on the canoe.
Which doesn't happen in Shada.
No, but it's that footage, and then they put a special effect on it, which is very fucking funny. And then John Pertwee as the 3rd Doctor and Patrick Troughton as the 2nd Doctor, and then there's a whole bevy of companions associated. And then you have Carol Ann Ford reprising her role as Susan from the 1st Doctor era, and then you have Richard Herndal playing the 1st Doctor. And it's such an amazing contrast of Richard Herndal basically did nothing to evoke the 1st Doctor. There's just he kind of looks like him from the back. He doesn't look like him at all from the front. The costume's not even quite right. He has this cane with him all the time, which is not a the Doctor. The 1st Doctor occasionally had a cane. Was not a regular thing about the character, and so really is distracting. He has basically no real chemistry with Carol Ann Ford, and he just doesn't evoke anything of the character. It's not even that he's not trying to do the impersonation. It's just he feels like he's playing someone completely and utterly different, and it's such a weird thing. And the 5 Doctors is a interesting but very messy episode of Doctor Who, and part of it is that I'll excuse that Tom Baker didn't want to come back because he had been on the show for 7 years, and there's a lot of stuff involved with that. That's fine. But it's we have seen in the history of the show recasting a Doctor and it not fucking working, because anytime Richard Herndal is on screen, it just never worked for me. But the exact opposite of that, every single second of David Bradley in Twice Upon a Time 100% works for me as the 1st Doctor. He 100% evokes that character. And everything that Steven Moffat does with that character in the writing, and David Bradley does with the character in the performance, even the things that getting the brandy and stuff like that, which is something that the 1st Doctor never would have done because you couldn't have shown that on a kids TV show. There's something about the way they characterize the 1st Doctor that is both it's sort of like they do two things. It's like, one, it feels like you're getting a window into the first Doctor through the lens of what is allowable by modern television standards, which feels like weirdly authentic. Like there's something they managed to do of like, this is what that guy was actually like. It's like, this is that character. You know he'd be the guy who'd go like try to get Brandy from like his secret compartment to help someone like deal with shock instead of like doing something else. You know, this is and he is like, I mean, some of those lines about like when he tells Bill like, if you keep on talking like that, you're going to get a good smack bottom. Like that is something the first Doctor said in Dalek Invasion of Earth. So it's like, but a lot of that attitude feels like we're getting like kind of slightly unfiltered first Doctor because television, like what you can show on television has laxed since 1963. But then also I like that the portrayal of him is not necessarily what I would say is the first Doctor from the point that they pull him out of. Like the first Doctor, by the time you get to the 10th planet, has gone on such a big character arc that he's such a kinder, like nicer, like warmer character. He's much more recognizable as like the Doctor.
He stopped kidnapping people.
Yeah, exactly. Like by the time you get to like season 3, and particularly I think in The War Machine, which is the story preceding, I think that's the story preceding the 10th planet, because there's one in there that doesn't exist anymore.
I think that's the Smugglers.
Yeah, I think the Smugglers, and that doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
So the one before the Smugglers, the one before the 10th planet that actually exists that you can like properly watch is The War Machine, which that is the episode that the supercomputer Wotan says that the Doctor's name is Doctor Who. So we know that his name is actually Doctor Who. That's in the canon of the show. You cannot deny it. That is also where he is like a full kind of like heroic character. It feels like he has come on this big journey. There's a brilliant shot of him standing in the street, like standing kind of like I think it's like kind of like from the perspective of like the Wotan machine that is like coming towards and like attacking these people, and he's standing like on his own in the street, like holding his lapel, kind of like defiantly and heroically against the machine, which is something that like is not a super first Doctor thing to do from like the first season. And this show, like what Twice Upon a Time does, is it feels like it kind of pulls some of those traits from the latter era of his run, but a lot of him feels like what he is at kind of near the beginning of his run, or even I feel like kind of what you would project him being like right before you meet him. Because the second you meet the Doctor at the beginning of An Unearthly Child, or like halfway through An Unearthly Child, he's on the point of having started a character journey from being this gruff, like angry man who wants nothing to do with humans. He doesn't even want to be on Earth in the 60th or in like the 20th century in the 60s. Like he doesn't like this decade. He doesn't like this century. He doesn't even really like this planet that much. He's just here because Susan wants to stay, because Susan's tired of moving around all the place and he just wants to get on with his work. Like he goes from being that guy and then kidnapping Barbara and Ian because he doesn't want them to go out and like expose the TARDIS to the world, and that thus like Susan wouldn't be able to be out there anymore because the world would know about her, and like kidnapping them. And he goes from that to being like this hero, and that like trying to sort of like portray the character across that spectrum, that character development is a tricky thing to do, and I think they made the right choice of sort of like taking little bits of him across all that and taking him a little bit back before with that speech that he has with Bill about why he left and what he was running to. That feels like that's right. Like that's what that character is, particularly near the beginning. They captured something about the essence of who the first Doctor is that is so different from the Doctors we know. That the first Doctor is not this character that is the hero. He's not this character that goes in and solves every single problem with like a flick of the sonic screwdriver and like a funny joke. He is not that guy. He is a scientist. He has a curiosity about the world, but he's not intensely compassionate. He's not... I don't even know if I would, at the beginning of the run and like for most of the first season, I don't know if I would call him a good person at all. Like, I think he works to become a good person, but he starts as being like sort of morally neutral, and that's such an interesting place for the character to be.
And there's so much nuance in how Moffat writes both the first Doctor and the distance between him and other characters. So, like, you get to have your fun that you normally have in a multi-Doctor story where the Doctors, you know, visit each other's TARDISes and they banter. And the 12th Doctor, I love how, you know, he tries to hide the guitar from the first Doctor, and he's like, I don't know who could have left that in there. And just a little, you know, they have all that first scene in the TARDIS together. It's just a joy. It's very fun. And then you have, darker moments where they're like considering their own mortality. And you have, little funny moments where the first Doctor like sees 12 with the sunglasses indoors and is just horrified.
His monocle pops off.
Yes, his monocle pops off. Or he tells him like, quit waving that stupid thing around. But when he tells him to quit waving the stupid sonic screwdriver around, what that's followed by is the first Doctor having a piece of insight into this enemy. It's not an enemy, but we think it is at this point, that the Doctor today could never have because he's too into the gadgetry and everything. Yeah. And that's like, okay, there's more to this than just the gimmick. And, you can have the one line where he says something very sexist about Bill, but then where that's contrasted and when you see that the 12th Doctor feels like some genuine shame about who he used to be or something, there's more to it than just the gimmick. Yeah. And consistently, and especially by the time you get to the planet they go to meet Rusty from Into the Dalek, and there's that moment where the first Doctor and Bill are on their own and finally have this little heart-to-heart where he talks about why he's traveling the universe. And again, so much more than a gimmick.
Yeah.
And yeah, just the distance they take that character over this 1 hour, and he's not even the primary Doctor of the hour, is incredible. And I want to ask a question.
Okay.
Because it's a limited sample size.
Yes.
And this is only technically a multi-Doctor story with an asterisk because one of them is not the original Doctor.
Yeah.
Is this the best multi-Doctor story?
No. I would still put the Three Doctors. I'd have this undying love for the Three Doctors that cannot be broached.
I understand.
I literally, about 5 hours ago, I rewatched the scene on YouTube from the Three Doctors where the second Doctor, the third Doctor meet, and the second Doctor says to the third Doctor, "You are being a bit dim, aren't you?" And I laughed for about it, and I'm still laughing now.
No, it's such a fun episode. It's just like, it's also, that episode to me when I got to it is a really messy episode narratively. I think it I don't know. It feels like the attention is paid to the chemistry between 2 and 3, and that's where you want the chemistry paid, and it is so much fun. It is so magical, and there's a lot of other parts of that episode that kind of fall flat for me. But and I haven't seen the 5 Doctors or the 2 Doctors, but I never hear anyone.
This is better than those.
Yes,
yeah.
But now that I think about it, I might even put this above like Day of the Doctor in Modern Who, just because I think what it does with having 2 Doctors together is so thoroughly not a gimmick. It's amazing to me how much character stuff is done in that distance. And, I love in that same interview with Steven Moffat on the Fan Show, he talked about like where the genesis of this idea came from. And he's very open. Only Steven Moffat would say it in this way. Everyone else would like make the story look more impressive. But he said, well, it was at a Comic-Con panel, and someone asked, which 2 Doctors would you want to see team up? And he said, well, whoever the current Doctor is in the first Doctor, because there's no more interesting gap. But sadly, we don't have William Hartnell with us. And then Peter Capaldi pointed out, well, there is David Bradley. And that's where Moffat got the idea. And it's like, he's so right. And he used it so well. There is no bigger gap to explore. And I'm not trying to argue with you about the 3 Doctors. Everything you say about it is true. It's got I think the funniest moment in Doctor Who with he is me and I am him. Yes, and we are all together. Goo goo goo. What do you mean, Doctor? And it's, very, very funny. I'm just saying, like, there's something about the distance that is explored here between those 2 that I find so compelling. And it's done in a regeneration story. Holy crap.
Yeah, no. Because it is, like, what this story has to do of, like, do all their generation stuff for the 12th Doctor, and do all the stuff for the first Doctor, but also just, like, introduce the first Doctor to people. Like,
yeah.
Because, again, like, the vast majority of people watching the show have no real experience with the character. They've probably seen a clip of him on like a Doctor Who something that happened at one point, and that's it, But in having to introduce that idea of that character and express, I think, the essence of that character, and then also express how the show has changed, but then also how he's the same person. I think it might be in that I've watched a lot of Steven Moffat. He's given a lot of interviews about this episode, and he's still giving interviews that have yet to come out. I think it's in that one from the Fan Show where he talks about how one of the most magical things about this episode is that it works. Is that you can have the first Doctor, as portrayed by David Bradley, but as we talked about, portrayed really beautifully by David Bradley. You can have the first Doctor, that character, and you have the 12th Doctor together, and they are the same. They are like recognizable enough to be the same character, and that like that illusion works, because that's always where, like, I think for some people maybe it doesn't. I think or like maybe before this episode it wouldn't have that. Like I think there are a lot of Doctor Who fans that have a hard time with the first Doctor stuff because it is really different, and like that character, that the portrayal of the character is in such a different place. But the heart of the character is so still there. And rewatching An Unearthly Child / 100,000 BC again. There are a lot of arguments about how to refer to that serial. We Doctor Who fans know what to have arguments about. But that and like the sort of the first half of the Daleks, as different as that character is, you can so see him there. You can so see like the weird pettiness, the like assurance in his own righteousness of like those sorts of things that are 100% still in the DNA of the character even today. And it's just this like weird miracle of writing and like television and whatever that fucking works. Like, how absurd is that? That's 53 years. It's been, or like, yeah, right? It's been
54. This was,
yeah. So it's 54 years since that character came about in that incarnation, and it still fucking works, and that character is still the same. How is it even possible? Like, how many different writers and like from like different like so across time and generations and styles of television and everything, do with like the people who created the first Doctor and the people who have created the 12th Doctor, and that works. And it's amazing.
And it also being in a regeneration story is so special because there are technically 3 Doctors in this one.
That's true.
And we meet Jodie Whittaker at the end, and I know it's only 30 seconds, but I think in part because of the groundwork laid, and in part because I think she's actually kind of amazing in just those 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's like, and we keep going, and you know what? She's the same person as these other 2. Yeah. And you just immediately buy it. Yeah. That is the magic of Doctor Who. That's why it's the greatest TV show. That's
no TV show, no anything could ever do this. It's such an absurd premise. It's such an absurd situation.
Steven Moffat said it best. I think it's in the fan show where he said, this is the only episode of TV ever where we can verifiably say that David Bradley is playing a younger version of Jodie Whittaker. Yeah. And that is such a great way to view it. But that's the magic of Doctor Who, that fucking David Bradley can play a younger version of Jodie Whittaker. I love it.
Yeah.
But let's talk about other parts of the episode, Sean. Yes. I mean, we'll save 12 for later.
Okay.
You want to?
Yeah.
I think it's so easy to overlook this and all the other good things this episode does. Mark Gatiss does a beautiful job in this story.
He's so good. It's such a, like, I love Mark Gatiss. I know that we beat up a lot of his episodes and have fun with
We do it lovingly.
Yeah, I've said this before and I'll say it again. He is in my like top 10 people living today that I would like to talk to Doctor Who about in person.
Yes.
Mark Gatiss is in that group. He has such an amazing love and affection for the show. And he's written some very good episodes. He wrote a really good episode with Robot of Sherwood. And he's written some bad episodes and some okay episodes. But no matter what, but he fucking wrote the episodes, man. Like he got the job. He was there. He was the fucking, like, you need 12 or 13 episodes to fill out a season. That's a hard fucking thing for showrunner to do. And Mark Gatiss always turned into script. It was usually not the best script. It was never the best script.
But you know what?
Sometimes it was the worst script, but it wasn't always the worst script.
But you know what it always was? It was a passionate script.
Exactly.
I'll give it that.
He brought us fucking Alpha Centauri back at the end of Empress of Mars. That's the kind of man Mark Gatiss is. And so he deserved to be able to go out on his run of Doctor Who, which I assume this is probably the last time he's going to be like directly involved in the show.
He said he has not had contact with Chris Chibnall, so it could, obviously it could happen in the future. There's no law, but it seems like Chris Chibnall is doing a very John Nathan Turner thing of like hard cut from the past.
Yeah, we're doing a big reset, and so if this is Mark Gatiss's last bow out on the show, I like that he gets to bow out like on top and something that he is so exceptional at, and he's so good. He's a great actor, and he's so good in this part. It's something of like I think basically everybody who knows enough about old Doctor Who kind of assumed that he was playing the father / or grandfather, however like the generations would work out for the Brigadier, and that like that is who it turns out to be. But it's like I like that it's pretty transparent of like an idea. Like there's something about, I feel like we've been exposed to Steven Moffat's psyche for so long that everybody, as long as you know who the Brigadier is and have a strong conception of who that character was and is important in the history of the show, and you've watched modern Doctor Who and paid attention to Steven Moffat as a person, everybody knew that character was the grandfather of the Brigadier. But I liked basically assumingly knowing that going in, because I got to see like Mark Gatiss' performance in that light, because I think he's performing in that light, and you see little bits of the family of Lethbridge Stewart in who he is and the way he carries himself, and in his awesome fucking mustache, and he's just really good, and his character is important.
Yes,
it's really important to the story.
Yeah, so two things. One, it's obvious to us, but it's not obvious to the Doctor, and that's the thing that makes it work.
Yeah.
That the Doctor doesn't think that way, he wouldn't think that way, and so when it happens to him, and it's this beautiful kind of surprise at the end of both of these Doctors' lives, one who hasn't met Lethbridge Stewart yet, and one who has, at this point, fairly distant memories of him. It is this triumphant, beautiful moment in the middle of a bigger triumphant, beautiful moment that is the Jacques Noel scene. But the other thing, he is very important. This episode is basically a four-hander. You have two Doctors, you have Mark Gatiss and Pearl Mackie, and I think, this script is worth studying. It is a great script in how it's basically just four characters, and each one is so important that if you took any of those pillars out, the episode collapses.
Yeah.
You need all of them. And, we'll talk about Pearl Mackie in a minute, and I don't know how much more we have to say about her other than she's great, and I understand why she could only do the one season, but I will miss Bill.
Yeah.
because I love her. And I would kind of love to see what Bill would make of the Doctor turning into a woman, and just all of that would be so much fun. But, they can always do that in a Christmas special.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, with Mark Gatiss, though, it's not just a gimmick. It's not Steven Moffat calling his best friend up and just putting him in the episode for the hell of it. It's because you need this human character at the heart of it. The Doctor is both fighting for and unknowingly kind of fighting against, because the actual threat of the episode is the Doctor himself. It's that he, tried to die at two different points in time. He tore a little hole in space-time, and this one seemingly insignificant man was torn out of it. And just the amount of warmth Mark Gatiss conveys in those scenes as this man, this very upstanding, stiff upper lip British man who basically senses throughout that he's going to have to go back and die, but he's had this brief reprieve to go have this insane adventure with these two insane space aliens,
Yeah.
It's so much fun, and it's such a beautiful performance, and I wish Mark Gatiss acted more. He's so good at it.
Yeah.
He's, he plays a minor character in Game of Thrones. He's been in 2 episodes. And I just, in everything I see him in, I just wish he was in more of it. And I like that it's just one Doctor Who story, but he is a, equal fourth of the episode.
Yeah.
And he's great. And that last scene where he crawls back into the pit, and just the intensity of that, part of me was they're going to have to pull out of this, but how will they? This is intense. And then the full reveal of what they're doing with that character and that moment in time, because I had made the connection, maybe they're going to do the Christmas armistice, but I didn't know for sure. And the way they lay that all out at the end, it's so earned, it's so beautiful, and because it's so tied to all 4 of the main characters and their different beliefs and desires and hopes and fears, it just hits you like a ton of bricks.
Yeah. Because, the other thing that the character does is that he helps serve a strong contrast to the experiences that the First Doctor and the 12th Doctor are going through. That because this is a story about putting the Bill character aside, who kind of gets to serve as a foil for all 3 of the characters. It's a story about 3 men on the verge of an extraordinary change, and one of them doesn't get to choose about that change, and 2 of them do have a choice. And so he's not a brigadier, but the brigadier character, the captain.
I think he's a captain.
He's a captain. The captain character, played by Mark Gatiss, is ripped from the moment right before his death to have his memories harvested or whatever, and then he gets kind of accidentally transported to the Doctor's time zone because of all the wibbly wobbly bullshit. But so he's in his whole journey of as we keep on revisiting the character over the course of the episode, he has that great scene with Bill inside the First Doctor's TARDIS, where he's talking about he's shaking, and he realizes I was in this moment of kind of being able to accept it, but now that I've been pulled out, I can't do this. And he has that great line where he says and I have this terrible feeling that they're going to put me back in that pit.
I also love how he talks about his family, and he says, my wife will be okay, she'll be sad, but she's a sturdy woman.
Yeah.
That's why, and he's and my sons, well, all sons must move on from their father. It's just a great piece of writing.
Yeah.
And, I really do look forward to the upcoming Big Finish series, Captain Lethbridge Stewart, that has not been announced, but I am sure will be a thing.
That's true. Yes, it will absolutely. Yes,
100%. That's where Mark Gatiss' association with Doctor Who is heading, because they wouldn't even need to pay him.
Yeah, no, he'll just show. He's probably asking them, it's like, oh, I had the. He probably wrote a script for like the first episode. It's like, guys, I got this great idea. Hear me out. But the way that character's sort of character arc contrasts with the first Doctor, who is refusing to regenerate because he's afraid of what's happening, and the 12th Doctor, who refuses to regenerate because he's just too tired. And I think like both of them kind of get to see in that contrast with the Captain that like they're being a little bit childish in some ways, of that like you should choose life because you can, and he like doesn't get the choice of choosing life. Like that's not, he's not been afforded that power, and so like they get to both like give that to him. I think learn that lesson of like to keep going on and keep moving on and power through it and stiff upper lip and British and all that good stuff. But the other thing that Mark Gatiss does, because like all that like the function of the character and the plot and everything is so perfect, and like you said, this script 100% should be studied to how to handle these character relationships. But then also this episode is tremendously ludicrously funny, and Mark Gatiss has some just hilarious moments. My favorite, that all 3 times I've watched this episode just makes me crack up so much, is when they have gone through the whole process of meeting the Testament and like escaping from their ship and all that stuff, and they go in to the first Doctor's TARDIS and like get inside, and it's his second time being in a TARDIS, but it's the second different TARDIS. He has that line of like, I say these police boxes are ever so good. It's the most British line ever about Doctor Who. Yeah, so amazing.
I got a flash where I could see him as the companion to like any classic Doctor in that moment. You know what I mean? Like he could just slot into the 70s or something. He'd be so great.
It's so funny. These police boxes are ever so good.
And of course, that is totally what the father of Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart would be like.
That's one of the things I'm sort of like alluding to of taking some of the Lethbridge Stewardiness and like embodying it in this character, is that he has, the most important thing that Lethbridge Stewart had was this ability to take whatever came at him and just like have it roll right off his back. And that's 100% the Captain is in, like a situation that is honestly more absurd than any situation the Brigadier was ever in, other than maybe the Modern Undead that you haven't gotten to yet. That's the 5th Doctor Brigadier story.
But he's also had a lot of experience by then.
Yeah, and like Captain, like this is a cracker of the story. Like a lot of shit happens to this guy over a very short period of time, and he just like totally rolls with it.
Yes. Oh, it's beautiful. And he is, if you think about it, he's the human in the story, because Bill, obviously the original Bill is a human, but the character here is like literally a projection on a robot kind of thing. Yeah. So like if you take that out, the Doctor is an alien, the other Doctor's an alien. He's our human link, and Mark Gatiss plays that perfectly, and just beautiful part of the episode. Bill, Pearl Mackie, she's great. She's always great. Yeah, I so look forward to following her career from here in whatever she does. The last couple Doctor Who companions have certainly struck it big. Yeah, Karen Gillan starring in a new Jumanji movie that's grossed $500 million.
And Guardians of the Galaxy.
She's going to rule the universe. She's so great. And Jenna Coleman, who is playing Queen fucking Victoria, which is, I think for British people, probably a pretty prestigious role.
Yeah, I would imagine so.
Yes.
She was sort of famous.
Yeah. And Bill, I think Pearl Mackie, sky's the limit. She's so good.
Yeah.
And as you say, I like what you said here. She's like a lens reflecting off everyone else here. And I think Steven Moffat found a very clever way with how he wrote this of Bill gets to come back and she gets to be the sounding board for all this, but it doesn't interrupt the arc Bill Potts went on over the 12 episodes of Series 10. Her ending in The Doctor Falls is still her ending. Yeah. And this is a way to use Pearl Mackie, who is the presence you absolutely want in this story, without interrupting the character of Bill Potts. And I think that's also just such a clever piece of writing.
Yeah, like that was the thing I was really satisfied with of that, because that was always the part about like intellectually thinking about like the sort of like the chess pieces they had laid out in front of them that we knew about for Twice Upon a Time. The part that like I was most unsure about is what the fuck did, like, how do you bring Bill back when she just left? Like, how do you handle that? And I assume that because we left that door is sort of like open in a way at the end of The Doctor Falls, that she's out there with Heather in some capacity. That I just assumed that was how she was going to come back, because that door is left open. You might as well use the door you left open. And instead, Steve Moffat was like, well, fuck that. We'll just build a whole new door and do that because it works better. It works a lot better, especially for the 12th Doctor. I think it works a lot better to not have that exact character back with that exact history that he has to sort of grapple with, this weird relationship with this memory construct of Bill that is basically Bill, but is also not in a lot of ways, because she is also, because it's one of the things that about like the Bill's construct that is not like self-conscious enough about, I think that like this is not a criticism of the writing, but I think it's something interesting about the writing, is that the character, like the Bill character, keeps on saying like all we are is memories, so that means I'm just like Bill. That's like, but no, but you also, you know that you're a memory construct. Like, you know that you're not real, so you can't be Bill, because Bill knew that she was a human and that Bill was flesh and blood. And I think it's an interesting position that Pearl Mackie is in, of playing, of having to both be basically just Bill, but in these like key moments you see that's like, no, like you are a computer. Like you know these things and you're saying these things and you're part of this system that Bill was never a part of, so you can't quite be her no matter what. Like, even if you went on the adventures with the Doctor again, where she has that great line of like saying like, I never forget this. I hope we laugh about this for years. That like, of her like kind of wanting to go on journeys with the 12th Doctor again, that would have never worked with this version of the character. It's a really smart way to bring her back and have it be very effective.
One last character who isn't Peter Capaldi. How nice was it to see Matt Lucas?
Yeah, it's very good.
We'll get to the other cameo. Yeah. Nardole was fucking funny here.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, he has glass nipples and his invisible hair.
So great. All right.
Cuddle.
Before we get to the man of the hour, I want to cover a couple other things, because I think the Peter Capaldi discussion is going to take us to the end.
Probably, yeah.
First off, I think we've covered pretty much everything there is to say about Steven Moffat at this point. We did 2 whole episodes about his tenure.
Yes, we did.
One last question I forgot to ask, and you brought it up earlier. We talk about how funny his scripts are all the time. Even his worst, like The Wedding of River Song is a funny episode in places.
Yes.
He is incapable of not being funny. We can talk about where he is in the Pantheon. Is he the funniest Doctor Who writer?
I'd probably say so, yeah.
Yeah. Like if we can say like one thing just he, I think, inarguably is kind of on top with.
Yeah, like the only competition he has is probably Douglas Adams, but like that's a weird situation because Douglas Adams has 2 stories, so it's like, does that really count?
Yeah. Yeah, certainly for someone who had a long association with the show. All right, so there's that. A couple of technical things I want to talk about on this side of the episode. Rachel Talalay can direct a fucking episode.
Yeah, God.
Like,
especially once you get to the scene near the end with like the World War I soldiers coming out with the piece. Like, that's so beautifully done. Beautifully done. The scale of it. It's just, and it's assuming that, you know, they couldn't have had like the biggest location in the world, but she makes it feel so real and palpable. The other thing I think directorially, I don't think anyone has ever shot the TARDIS itself as well as Rachel Talalay does. Yeah. She's had the help of an amazing set, but she's made that set come to life more than anyone else. There is a specific shot in the regeneration scene where Capaldi's giving his monologue. He falls down while talking about, you know, children can hear my voice. And as he's kind of on the ground a little bit, and there's smoke in the foreground. Yeah. There's this like beam bisecting the shot. Yes. He is leaning. The geography of that shot, the structure of it, the emotion of it, the color of it, that's a shot that should be studied. It is a great shot. Yeah, that was when I was watching it yesterday, sort of rewatching it in preparation for this discussion, that I particularly noticed that one, because it's also like, as it starts with him lying all the way down, and you said there's like, it's like 2 beams in the foreground that sort of like frame the shot, and then he leans up and the shot moves slightly to the right, so that now it's like he's like almost leaning on the beam in the foreground in this like weird perspective way. Yeah, it's fucking amazing. It's fucking amazing. Just it's consistently, I think she's the best director modern who has ever had. I think she belongs in the pantheon with, you know, Christopher Barry and Douglas Camfield and Patty. What's her name? There's also Patty. I forget. There's all sorts of great directors from Classic Who. Rachel Talalay is with them. She's one of the best. Yeah. And I also love that Steven Moffat has been so open in just saying she's our favorite. Showrunners never say that. Yeah. They're never. Obviously, everyone just like everyone has a favorite child. Of course you do, but you don't say it. Like, just, he's been so, and I love that. I like Steven Moffat is just this kind of guy who I don't think is good at hiding his feelings. Yeah, he's like, like very vocally uncomfortable with interviews because he's like a shy person. He doesn't like doing that. And I think he's like not great at media training because it's like he will just because he said that in that fan show. He just says like she's our favorite director. He's like, and then he realizes what he just said is like, I mean, not to offend anyone else, but like, yeah, she just is.
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, okay, yeah. I mean, she is.
Yeah. If we can't have her directing on Doctor Who for years to come, I just hope her career gets bigger because of this.
Yeah.
And not that she doesn't have a good career. And, you know, she had a whole period in the 90s where she actually was doing some big movies with Hollywood. And then, as most women directors do, got put in movie director jail. And she's just an immense talent. And I think one of the best directors working in TV today. And the 7 episodes of Capaldi's run she did, they're not just well-directed episodes, they are defining for that character. Like, the way she frames Capaldi, the way she works with his, like, body and figure and presence in these scenes and the emotionality of things. Like, you do not have the 12th Doctor without Rachel Talalay.
Yeah. And then also that, like, every single episode she directs feels different. Like, you can tell that it's her because it's directed excellently. But other than that, it's like there's nothing about it that you're like, oh, this has to be a Rachel Talalay episode because they're doing this shot or that shot. It's because, like, most of the episodes she's doing are, like, basically different fucking genres. You know, like Heaven Sent and Hellbent right next to each other demand completely different things directorially. And, like, you know, The Doctor Falls and World Enough in Time and Twice Upon a Time, all 3 of those episodes demand completely different skill sets as a director, basically, because they're utterly different stories in almost every single facet imaginable.
And, you know, if she is available and if she'd like to do it, I think Chris Chibnall would be a fool not to ask her back.
Yeah. If she wants to do more Doctor Who, they should let her do more Doctor Who.
Yeah,
they should also have her direct a Star Wars movie.
Yes,
For God's sake, have her direct a fucking Star Wars movie. You crazy people.
It would be good. And, you know, she's also probably cheaper than J.J. Abrams.
Yes.
Just, if that's a concern, Lucasfilm, you know, British TV directors are cheaper than J.J. Abrams.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Love Rachel Talalay. I also love Murray Gold. Mm-hmm. And we have to talk about Mr. Murray Gold because we still don't know if he's coming back for season 11 or series 11, season 37, whatever we're calling it.
Yeah.
We don't know if he's coming back for the Chibnall run. The way Chibnall is moving, I'm guessing not. This really does feel like the John Nathan Turner switch where it's like everyone's gone other than the actors who are still on screen. And mostly they left immediately too.
Yeah.
And so I'm guessing he's gone before. I was guessing that before I saw Twice Upon a Time. Twice Upon a Time is his goodbye letter musically. Like, there's a bunch of beautiful new music and the way he uses themes, but it's also like he has not dipped into the Russell T Davies era bag of his compositions much at all under Steven Moffat. I don't know if ever. A couple of times with The Master. He's done that with Missy.
Yeah, a couple of times with The Master, and then he's sort of like done reworked versions of the 9th/10th Doctor theme. Like there was that in Hellbent, has like the Western-y version of it.
But here we have full on, he uses the Doctor's theme that was introduced in Rose in episode 1. He uses for the first Doctor's regeneration scene, he uses the Ood song from the end of Time when 10 regenerates. Like there's a bunch of these all over the place. And
for me, the one that felt like, oh, he's leaving is when like about halfway through the episode with the 12th Doctor and the first Doctor have their like heart to heart on the bench about like why. Like why is the first Doctor refusing to regenerate? And he's playing Doomsday from the end of season 2.
I didn't even catch that one.
Yeah,
wow,
that was like that because that's just like a really distinctive. It's one of my favorite pieces of his music. It's really distinctive, and he's never used it. I don't think he's ever used it since that finale. And that felt like a little like. There you go. Like I'm reusing some. Like it just feels like he found a couple of spots to reuse his best pieces over the years, whether it was Russell T Davies or with Moffat.
And always perfect. Like, it's always hard to know what to do musically when a new Doctor is on screen, and obviously you're not going to write their new theme yet. You don't know the character. I think when, Capaldi goes gold, and then, we see Jodie, we don't even see her actually at first, but there's those beautiful POV shots, and it's the Doctor's theme that was shared by 2 Doctors, 9 and 10. That hit me so much harder than I think any new piece of music could in that moment. And I know that because we had that with, 10 and 11 and 12 of like, they're fun little pieces when you get there, but like just calling back that far it immediately cements her in the part in a way that like, a lot of things are doing in that moment, and the episode is doing, but the music helps immensely.
And that's also another moment where it feels like if he was going to stay on, I assume he would have probably written a new piece of music for that scene, because it is exactly that piece of music. It's not like a reworking of it.
Yeah.
It is that track.
No, I played as the theme song. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, not the YouTube version, the theme song here, I just pulled it from the series 1 and 2 soundtrack, and it's the same track played in Twice Upon a Time.
Yeah. So it's not like when the Doomsday sort of like song plays in this episode, it's not the same track. It's just like, it's the same sort of like theme. It's the same melody in this one little scene, but it's a reworked version of it. Like, that is just that piece of music. So it does definitely feel like that is him bowing out from his role on the show.
And I tip my hat to you, sir. I think what Murray Gold has done in the past 14 years of Doctor Who is the greatest achievement in the history of TV music. Easily.
Yeah.
I've talked to my brother about this. Again, he's a composer. I think one of the only serious pieces of competition would be Michael Giacchino on Lost.
Sure, yeah.
Because it's very rare you have one composer over a long television series who can really develop that. That's, Michael Giacchino, Lost, that will always be his masterwork. But Murray Gold did this for years, over a decade, multiple doctors, multiple showrunners, all sorts of writers, all sorts of genres, and his music was 100% of the time great. It built on itself, it iterated, it got better and better. And you see that here, in the regeneration scene where he's just fluidly using all these 12th Doctor pieces built around the Heaven Sent theme. But God, he's so good at it.
Yeah.
And he will be one of the toughest acts to follow for the new team.
Definitely, yeah.
But let's talk about another tough act to follow. And
yeah.
Mr. Peter Capaldi.
Uh-huh.
Let's start with just in this episode, what he does. What moved you? What should we talk about with 12 in the confines of Twice Upon a Time?
So obviously, we can't talk about the ending yet, because
we'll get there.
Talk about that later. But I mean, it is this, because one of the things that this episode manages to do is, it does so much. It's just like, one, it is a culmination of his character arc, obviously, which you sort of talked a little bit about. But then also you need to, and you get to contrast him with the First Doctor and the 12th Doctor. Being the incumbent Doctor in the multi-Doctor story always has this interesting role of kind of having to sort of like plant his feet and be like, this is what the show is now, and sort of contrast that with the First Doctor. And in particular, you have that scene. I mean, this whole scene is just so amazing of when they encounter the Testament. And, that's like one of the First Doctor standout scenes is when he gets to go out there on his own and stand like in front of the TARDIS with his hands on his lapel, and that great, brilliant set with like the amber light and all that stuff. But then as they sort of investigate and get to do all that stuff, the 12th Doctor then comes to this point where he's like, okay, now I'm going to take control of the situation. He just says, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do now. I'm going to escape. It's like I'm going to do this, and then when he's getting down the stairs, he's like, come on guys, let's go. And then I'm going to do blah 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 blah. And then once he gets to the bottom of the stairs, he says, and then I'm going to find out what it is you're doing, and if I don't like it, I'm going to stop you. And like that, it's such a like beautiful moment for the character. Like he just gets to be the Doctor in that moment. Like again, like contrasted with the First Doctor, who was never quite that person yet. That he was never the person to be able to like so fully command a moment like that, like against this sort of like massive opposing force, so like able to just sort of wrap it up with some humor and energy, but like fully like feel like, oh yeah, like he's going to like, if he doesn't like this, it's over, because that's who the Doctor is. Like that's who this character has come to at this point. And I love just being able to sort of like see him get a like another last moment like that in an episode again where it's like he gets to have a last moment like that, even with like that sort of like comes around and then pays off with him having probably the funniest line in the whole episode, where he realizes when he's with Rusty, it's not an evil plan. It's like, oh, I don't know what to do when it's not an evil plan.
It's great. You're forgetting the thing that in that big, I agree, I love your whole description of that, but in that big heroic moment he has, the payoff to that is this beautiful moment of undercutting it, where the First Doctor asks, like, who do you think you are? And he goes, I'm the Doctor.
And he gets to do the thing with his hands.
Yep.
I love when Peter Capaldi gets to be like theatrical with his hands like that. Like it reminds me of when he says like Doctor Mysterio in the Return of Doctor Mysterio. Yeah, it's so fucking good. I mean, he's just It's sad that this is the last time in his, like, with him being the incumbent Doctor, that we just get to fill a podcast with us saying over and over again, he's so fucking good at this.
He's so fucking good at this. This episode, one of the things I think Twice Upon a Time benefits from, for his performance particularly, in getting to be its own story, where a lot of the baggage of most regeneration stories is gone, because we already saw the thing that brings him to death's door and all that. And so there's a different kind of baggage at work here. But that different kind of baggage means there's a lot more, I think, emotional tones and shades he gets to play than, like, compare this, let's say, to The End of Time. David Tennant is amazing in that episode. David Tennant is also saddled with playing not one note, but the Doctor is like, that whole episode is the Doctor is, it's underlined by, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm very sad about dying. And here, like, the Doctor has already worked through a lot of this and just resolved to die. So there's a lot of scenes where he's just having fun. That scene of him bantering with the First Doctor when they first enter their TARDIS is so goofy and wonderful. When he comes out of the TARDIS in that big amber set you were talking about and sees Bill, and they hug, and then he's kind of, scared of her, doesn't know who she is. Just little moments like that. Like, he gets to just play his version of the Doctor again here, and it's not so completely one note tinged by, I'm gonna pop at the end of this hour. You know?
It's one of the things that's been true throughout all of the 12th Doctor's era, is that it gets to be really tonally rich and varied.
Yep.
And because, like, also, like, Peter Capaldi's so good at finding brilliant moments to play in that tonal variety, that he can be so brilliantly funny in this episode. Like, another, like, really comedic element is those moments that he gets to bounce off of, like, the First Doctor being the First Doctor, and, saying, it's like, oh, clearly Paulie's not around anymore. Just like, yeah, Paulie wasn't around that long, Doctor. Like, it took me a second. You were like, right, Ben and Paulie. Those are the companions you have at the moment. Like, they're not particularly memorable.
No, but like, because he's with the David Bradley character, and the First Doctor is saying some of these sexist things here and there. Even now, in his last hour, the 12th Doctor gets to show new shadings, which is not something Doctors in their final stories always get to do, right?
Yeah. Like, he gets that really great little moment, which is another one of those where they're on the First Doctor's TARDIS, which by the way, love that they, like, the one thing I hope they do, if they bring with the new TARDIS design, is I hope they bring back the weird interior doors of watching the recreation with Twice Upon a Time and then rewatching the First Doctor. I love the weird fold out interior doors of the TARDIS. They should bring those back. But when they're in that scene where they're in the First Doctor's TARDIS, and I forget what it is the First Doctor says this time, but he says something that's politically incorrect about Bill. And then the Doctor's like, pulls him aside, he's like, oh, no, hey, look at this, the space-time visualizer. Look at all these cool lights. Ooh.
Yeah.
And it's, because it's one of those props that if you're a Doctor Who nerd, like, yes, it's the space-time visualizer that was only on the First Doctor TARDIS. It's a weird little prop. I have no idea what it is. They never brought it back. It's just this weird little, like, obscure thing. And there's something really fun about Peter Capaldi getting to sort of, like, play with those things and get those little fun moments around having, like, some of, particularly once you get near the end, some of, like, the most sort of, like, potent dramatic material he's played.
Did you like seeing Rusty again?
Oh, I loved having Rusty back. I think that's another thing of that, like, demonstrates so much of, like, the journey this character has been on, because, that Into the Dalek is the second episode, and it's, like, really the first proper episode, in the same way that, like, the Cave of Skulls, the first episode from the caveman story, is really, like, the first proper First Doctor story, because you get the introduction out of the way. It's Into the Dalek is the first time the 12th Doctor, like, got to go on a proper adventure, and that contrast of, like, sort of, like, insecure, very short-haired Peter Capaldi being like, am I a good man, and trying to then going on this whole adventure with Rusty and being very stubborn and sort of not modern doctory in some ways, and then going from that to crazy hair Peter Capaldi, because his greatest asset, his hidden brilliant asset as an actor, as Doctor Who, has always been his hair, which has gotten steadily longer and longer and longer as his character has gotten more and more zany and affable and kind and approachable. I fucking love that. I love how ridiculous his hair is in this story. But him being to sort of re-encounter Rusty directly sort of, like, reminds you of all those things he used to be and how far this character has come, because he gets to encounter him again. And also just Rusty is cool. He's a cool Dalek. It was a cool concept. I'm glad that at least we got him one more time.
Something just to say, one of the ways I do like how Steven Moffat used the Daleks throughout his run is that there's not a lot of Dalek stories in the Moffat era, but there's plenty of little Dalek appearances, and I like that he kind of freed himself from like, okay, we can have a Dalek without a fucking invasion story or something, and they do it again here, and it's very effective.
Yeah. They also, I love the little touch of having the like weird mutant Daleks running around and pouncing on Mark Gatiss and stuff like that on that planet. That's a very good. It's one of those ideas of like, I can't believe they've never done that. That feels like something they absolutely should have done at some point before Doctor Who is Attack of the Dalek Mutants as opposed to like them inside their chassis.
Yes. All right. So we get through all the stuff on the Dalek planet. He doesn't know what to do with a non-evil monster, which is great. And then, of course, we get the final scenes with the Christmas armistice and seeing Nardole and our other cameo we'll get to. Peter Capaldi is never buried in this episode, and it's, I think, something, again, it would be easy to have the incumbent Doctor get kind of buried under all the fun new stuff, but he never is, but when he fully takes center stage in that last, 20 minutes, and Peter Capaldi, he's great throughout, and then he just, as he always is somehow capable of doing, finds another notch, and those last scenes, man, they are something else. The regeneration scene itself, we'll talk about. It's an all-timer. The scenes right before it, where he's left the Christmas battlefield, or the Christmas armistice, and he goes and talks to Bill, and then to Nardole, and there's the Clara cameo, and all of that, and his dialogue there, and the wistfulness of it, and how Talalay films him there, and how Murray Gold scores it. It's so heart-wrenching, but in this beautiful, transcendental way, humanistic way. I don't know if I'd even call it sad. It's so full of emotion.
Yeah, it's especially, he has that line of like when he starts to sort of like give that speech after he sort of encountered Bill in Nardole again, and he says, like, I would shatter you, my testimony would shatter you, like that whole speech.
I could fill a dozen of you.
And it's like, because you're not even really here. It's like, especially it's that turn of like he's talking to them, and then he says, but you're not even really here. You're just memories in glass. And that, it's so beautifully touching. And it's one of the things I love about his sort of like regeneration scene is that, like, because I think that's where his regeneration scene actually starts. It's not like it's, the proper full like speech and everything is when he's in the TARDIS, but it starts there. And it's like, it's this small quiet moment. And I love how much room it's given to breathe, because you get this full episode to deal with these kinds of emotions. Once you get to the end, you just get to lay it all out there, and it is, again, like in terms of the contrast, this is like one of the sort of like big things from Deep Breath and a lot of like throughout Series 8 is that Peter Capaldi or the 12th Doctor says, I don't think I'm a hugging person anymore. It's that's always something like the 10th Doctor and the 11th Doctor especially are running around and hugging people all the time, to a point where it's like, you just maybe shouldn't be hugging these people. Like, this is like maybe slightly aggressive. Like, you're hugging so much. And the Doctor has this mistrust of hugging. And there's that great line at the end of the series that says, I don't trust a hug. It's just a way to hide your face. And that kind of stuff. And he's come from that point to getting this beautiful moment where even if it's not the like proper real versions of Bill and Nardole, they get that nice group hug together, and Nardole gets to say, cuddle. But it's like he gets to say cuddle, and then it cuts back to Peter Capaldi's face, like buried in them for like 2 to 3 seconds. It just lingers on that shot, and without giving the character a line. And there's something so beautiful and heartwarming about seeing that that's how far the character has come, from this place of being so aloof, so sort of socially uncomfortable with himself and with people, and then going to be so confident and so warm that it's not even a thing. Like, he just gets to accept this last moment with his friends, or his memories with his friends, and embrace them one last time. Like, it's so smartly done.
Yeah, 2 things. So he has that line in there, and I forget the exact wording about how, like, you two meant so much to me. Whatever it's like, I can't describe how much you meant to me.
Yeah, thank you for everything you have been to me.
Thank you for everything you have been to me, but I have to do this last part alone. That utterly destroyed me when the episode, it was already coming on, and then it's just like that to the end, because they only ratchet it up when he gets in the TARDIS, but good God. All of that, but also, like, talking about the what are they called? The
Testament?
Yeah, the Testament, the testimony people, and memories, and then what we do with Clara here, which we'll talk about in a second. I also do love the theme of memory here at the end, and what it kind of ties into what you're talking about here, that, what the 12th Doctor is left with at the end is, I think at the end of The Doctor Falls, he is scared of letting go of everything he has learned and everything he has accumulated and the journey he has gone on, and saying, if I just, rewire my entire brain again, because that's what regeneration is, do I let go of all these things that changed me and meant so much to my being? And then getting to the end of this and that little quiet moment of acceptance with these two literal memory people, and saying, and Bill's argument that, no, I'm not the flesh and blood Bill Potts, but I am the real Bill Potts, and this is real, and it is meaningful. And in that little cuddle, realizing that and holding on to it and saying, this can't be killed. This part of me, it won't go away even if I change. And I think that's something Steven Moffat has been building to for a long time. I think it's the kind of thing that he couldn't probably write the first time he wrote Doctor Who. But all these years later, you come to this moment of in all the changes of Doctor Who and how that represents the changes we ourselves go through in life until the final change into death, how much do we hold on to? How much do we become different people? And I think the little, absolution that happens here in the space of memory is a really beautiful touch.
Yeah.
And represented by Jenna Coleman coming back, because she had to.
Yes.
The same way Karen Gillan had to be in Matt Smith's last episode. It would just kind of feel wrong if that went unresolved. I think we even predicted back when, Hellbent aired, that they would probably do something like this.
Yeah.
But the way they did it was so beautiful, so tied into the themes. It's very brief. Clearly, Jenna Coleman and Peter Capaldi were not on the set together.
Yeah.
But it doesn't bother me at all.
No.
It's such a great little moment because they're not in the same physical space together. He's not talking to anyone. He's talking to a mental projection,
Yeah, to his memory of her. And it is that, it's especially just that shot of, after Bill gives him the kiss on the cheek and he looks up and you just see the look in his eyes. And, Peter Capaldi has such a incredibly expressive face, that you just see that moment right there. And then he gives, the most, earnest, amazing smile I think he's ever given as the Doctor in that little that close up on him in that two shot with Clara. Yeah, it's such a good little moment. And
I think going on the journey of Series 9 where he had to erase Clara to move forward to now where he has grown enough to have her back.
Yeah.
That's a journey. It's a beautiful journey, and it doesn't feel like anything from Series 9 is canceled out by that.
No, yeah, it feels earned that that we have come so far with the character. That he's earned those memories back.
Yeah. And then the speech.
Yeah.
He decides, all right, one life won't kill anyone except me. Which, that is such a Don Baker line.
Yeah.
Oh, even the way he moves his face a little bit there, where it's this dark little joke that only he finds funny.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Sean, that speech. Oh my God. I didn't think Steven Moffat could top what he wrote for Matt Smith in his last scene. He did it.
Yeah.
He did it. We didn't have a bow tie to fall to the floor. But what we did have was this amazing, beautiful, transcendent speech about the absolute basics of what they have learned together and what the 12th Doctor has learned in the continuity of the series about what it means to be the Doctor. And it is projected in the most poetic way possible with this magnetic, amazing, balletic performance from Peter Capaldi. Oh my God, it shattered me.
Yeah, and especially it is that he has always been this sort of very professorish Doctor of ever since even in Deep Breath he's constantly doing the thing of question blah 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 blah. It's no, the answer is blah blah, and he's always sort of, that's part of his persona. Steven Moffat sort of identified that so much so that he made him literally a college professor for season 10, which was awesome. And so it is so beautifully perfect that his last moment is not this sad, somber moment. It's not this sad little I don't want to go, me. It's not this sort of little self-reflective moment. It's again, this is the last time we get to say this with Peter Capaldi being the properly incumbent Doctor in some ways. This is the Doctor that spent 1 billion years punching his way through a diamond fucking wall.
4.5 billion years.
Yes. He does not take things lying down. He does not do things the easy way. He is like morally and obsessively opposed to ever taking things the easy way. So instead of doing the I want to go thing or doing this like, this beautiful sort of like introspective speech, which is what Matt Smith got, he gets this big moment of giving this big lecture. I like what you said about it being balletic of him running across the whole TARDIS, like running
and never eat pears.
And never eat pears, yeah, and just like getting to be like physical and active right up until the moment he like can't even really move anymore. And it is such a beautiful speech. He comes so far of now again being able to impart everything he's learned as the Doctor, which is like at its core is that sort of be kind. It's that thing that he that conclusions to series 10 where, he's come so far that he managed to even like kind of impart on the Master / Missy what it means to be kind, of what it means to, that kindness is only kindness in the extremist with no hope, no witness, no reward, all that kind of stuff. That all that kind of fully comes circle with him taking this final moment to impart that onto his successor, and then having that little extra moment in there of him talking about that nobody can ever know your name.
Oh, it's so great.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. If Steven Moffat had to work through 2 years of Doctor Who puns to get to the moment where he could write that absurdly beautiful piece of poetry, every pun was worth it.
Yes.
Because it's poetic. It's just poetic, where he's talking about like, no one can ever know your name. They wouldn't understand it. Well, except for children in the stars. Like, it's not even fully coherent what he's saying. It's just so from the heart. And again, it's just this little piece of freeform poetry he gives, and tying that to the moment when his body gives out, it just tears you apart.
Well, do you know where that speech basically comes from?
Peter Capaldi himself, right?
Yes, yeah.
From a press conference.
Yes, that he was asked that question about like what do you think about like the Doctor's name? Why is the Doctor's name a secret or something to that effect? And he basically gives that answer that's because like obviously it's one of the things I've loved so much about Peter Capaldi being in the role is that he's this incredible fan of Doctor Who, and in some ways he's been thinking about Doctor Who literally his entire life, and he has his own ideas about the character. So you can feel how hands-on he is in that scene.
And Moffat has talked about he basically wrote it with Capaldi, and Talalay choreographed all of it with Capaldi. Like, there's so much of him in that moment. And I think there's an extra layer of poignancy to think about that, unless after Jodie Whittaker, Chris Chibnall goes in a really radically different direction, Peter Capaldi is probably the last person who's ever going to play the Doctor who was alive and conscious when An Unearthly Child aired.
Right.
Like, he was 5 years old. He watched it. He's been there the life of the series. I think he brings that to bear in the role, and he's probably, just because time moves on, the last person who's going to be that. I mean, it's it's a weird thing to think about, and I could be wrong, but that's a moment that I also thought about, one of the dozen times I was watching that scene.
Yeah, yes, and I love that sentiment. It's so beautiful, and it's so right, and it's like the right way to approach the idea of the Doctor's name is that it's not important, that it's not like and what it is like, this message of hope, that it's like, that it's something that, because of course humans wouldn't be able to fucking understand it, like Romana's name's not even really Romana, like she's got some ridiculous name that you shorten to Romana to make it convenient for us humans.
It's like the joke that Ford Prefect in Hitchhiker's Guide calls himself that because his actual name is only pronounceable on the planet in the vicinity of Beetlejuice.
Yeah, exactly.
And it involves syllables we cannot say. Yes, and then the final line, just laugh hard, run fast, be kind. Doctor, I let you go. And just the close-up on his face, the amount of acting he does in that moment, and that he rests on this moment of just complete and utter peace with it.
Yeah.
And it's both Capaldi and the Doctor. And then one of my favorite little details is that he leans back and extends his arms before the energy comes out.
Yeah.
It's a little thing, and it might have been decided in post for all I know, because in shooting, all he does is do this, and then,
everything explodes around him.
Yeah, but he does that, the music stops, and then the energy, like, he completely gives himself to it. Like, I think it's something that has been under-discussed with this episode in the larger press, is just how magnanimous an exit that is, of it is a complete gesture towards the future while finishing off this piece of the present. And it's such a gesture that it's, I let you go, and then full on, I'm ready, and this big gesture to, I release you, go.
Yeah.
And I love that. And it just clears the deck so beautifully for the next Doctor. Like, there's no baggage holding her down. And that's an important thing because, again, I do think there's a good deal of poignancy to I Don't Want to Go, but it also, like, especially for fans who only knew New Who and were only there for David Tennant, that shot poor Matt Smith in the foot. Because a lot of people just weren't going to accept whoever came next if the last line sounded like Russell T Davies was writing it at gunpoint. You know, which is kind of what that sounds like. So this is the polar opposite of that.
Yeah, and it's such a fucking perfect line in so many ways because it is like that, like it gestures to the future. I love how like it calls back to a line that Bill had earlier about like the hardest thing about knowing you is letting you go. It also is it has this whole like professorial context also of like you are dismissed from my lecture. I let you go now. I've said what I need to say. But the other thing it does is something that I think this whole episode does that is an undercurrent of the 12th Doctor's whole run that I really love, and it's particularly has been something I fixated on with this whole rewatch I did, because that's like the other thing with Twice Upon a Time is, you know, it was the culmination of my full rewatch of Modern Doctor Who from Series 1 to the Series 10 and Twice Upon a Time, is that one of the ideas that I think Steven Moffat plays with a little bit with Matt Smith, but gets really into with Peter Capaldi, is this idea that there is a distinction between the Doctor and this Time Lord character that we know, like this person, this man / now woman, that there is the person there who is he's just a guy. It's like she's just a gal. Like this is just a person that's like eccentric and weird and pretty smart and kind of crazy, but is a fucking person. Not a human being, but a normal Time Lord, whatever that is, relatively speaking. But has accumulated this legacy of the Doctor over the course of like this 1,000+ year or forever lifetime, however you want to like trust how much the Doctor has his own age, with now you are engaging with how much bullshit that is.
Where the fuck? I want to know where Russell T Davies got 907 years old from, because it does not fit with the math of any classic Who episode ever.
Exactly.
Unless your intention is just bald-faced, the Doctor lies about his age, which he obviously does. Like, because there's no way he could know, let alone that he could make an honest effort to. Where did you get 900? Whatever. Anyway.
You haven't even gotten to the 7th Doctor era where he literally says he's 957 years old.
Yeah, I know, but yeah.
So, but anyways, but like this like forever fucking lifespan that the Doctor has, he's accumulated and built up this legacy of the Doctor, which is something that all of modern Doctor Who is so fixated on, because it's part of that metatextual conversation of, you know, the whole show and the legacy of like that these people that are now making the show grew up with this legacy of the Doctor, and so it's, you know, it's so baked into what Doctor Who is now because it has to be, in the same way that like it's baked into what Star Wars is now because it has to be. But I love the idea from on a character level that the character that Peter Capaldi is playing is not the Doctor. It's not Doctor Who. It's this unnamed Time Lord that we never know what his name is, but he's like underneath it all, he's just a person
who exists in the moment and not in a myth.
Yeah, exactly. And that he's constantly in this position of having to live up to that title, and that's part of what his whole journey on is figuring out what the fuck does it even mean to be the Doctor? Like, what is that? If I'm going to keep on going around and calling myself and trying to live up to this legacy, what does that even mean? And there's that line in I think it's in The Witch's Familiar. It's either that or The Magician's Apprentice from the beginning of season 9, where he says to Davros that when like I came because you're sick and you asked, and if on a good day, if I try really, really hard, I'm not just some old Time Lord who ran the way. I'm the Doctor. And that sentiment is so affecting to me, I think, particularly because it goes back to the core of the show, which is something, if you listen to the classic Doctor Who podcast we're doing, I talk a lot about how the classic Doctor is one of the things that is so different is that he gets to feel like he's more of just a person, that he's, because he's not on top of the world, and so like the 4th Doctor gets to feel like a rebel because he doesn't have this whole legacy, because he doesn't have all this stuff. He just gets to be like a relatively normal person. He's eccentric and all that weird stuff, but he's not a god the way that the Doctor has to be today with the legacy of the show and the people who are making it. And I love like finding that space there, that there is this distinction, and it's highlighted so powerfully by having the first Doctor here, for whom the first Doctor, being called the Doctor, is because he has a doctorate from the Time Lord Academy. That's why that's that's like the big thing. That's the secret. It's not this all the bullshit they like to posh about this, the name I chose for myself, and the blah 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 that we go on about all the time. It's like, no, he's literally Doctor. That's why he's called the Doctor. Like, that's all it is, right? And it's just he doesn't like to tell people his name, and it's probably something of that, like, he went so long with Ian and Barbara without ever telling them what his name was, like, in some way, that he just got so embarrassed that he was socially stuck that now he couldn't tell anybody his name, because it had gone so far that now it would be like if, when I met you, Jonathan, I told you my name was Tim as a joke, and then that went on for like 6 months, and then all of a sudden I couldn't tell you that I'm not named Tim anymore, because that would just destroy everything. Like, if you're stuck in this situation.
I'd be like, we did 220 episodes of the Weekly Stuff podcast with Jonathan Lack and Tim. This is weird.
So I think it's kind of like that. Like, he's just the Doctor, and that's all it is. It's nothing, for the first Doctor, it's nothing extraordinary, because that's how the character was made. And so I love in that moment of Doctor, I let you go, that it's also like this person that Peter Capaldi is playing saying, like me, I'm letting that go. Like, it's over. Like, I am not the Doctor anymore. I don't have to live up to this anymore. I get to just be me in this last moment. I let you go. And that, to me, is one of the things that line is saying, that I think is one of the ways that this episode brings so much about the character development of this character full circle, is that it kind of, I think it puts a capper on that tension that has always existed between the 12th Doctor and this title that he's trying to live up to.
Yeah. Beautiful, multi-layered last line.
Yeah.
And I love your analysis of it there. So we're running out of time. Let's try to wrap this up. Maybe 5 minutes on, as much as we can in this moment, the legacy of Peter Capaldi as Doctor Who. There's so many ways we could tackle this, and we have, and I don't want to sound like a broken record. I think one of the points I always go back to is just that I think Peter Capaldi came on board and, he pitched a certain kind of fastball, and it made Steven Moffat and everyone around him better, in awe of that talent. Series 9 is, every episode is just a different challenge they are throwing at Capaldi, and he rises to every one of them. And, throughout this era, I think he helped elevate Doctor Who to a place it had not been in the 21st century, and it had not been in the 20th century for a while, I think kind of in the amount of Doctor Who I've watched, and, I've not seen a ton of, like, the 5th, 6th, and 7th Doctor, but I know which parts of that are supposed to be good and bad, so, right. But I've seen all of the 3rd, a lot of the 4th, a lot of the 1st and 2nd, and I generally, in my head, myself, I think the best, like, period of Doctor Who is those first 4 Doctors. Just, I think that's the highest tower that everything else has to live up to.
I agree.
And it is shocking how close Peter Capaldi and the 12th Doctor era come to being on top of that tower, in that tower, by that tower, and maybe just on par with it.
Yeah.
Is that a good way to put it?
Yes, I agree that, like, it is something of where, like he is so phenomenally good in this role as this character. He brings so much to it, and then, as you said, like, as we talked about a lot, that it felt like everything in the show elevated to his level, and he brought so much nuance to the character. There's so much warmth, but also some coldness. There's a tremendous amount of humor, but, like, humor in such a different way than the show had engaged with in such a long time. It feels like humor in the way that, like, Tom Baker was funny, that it's more, like, honest to the character, of, like, the character's not always trying to make a joke. It's just funny because of how it's framed.
And he's just a weirdo.
Yeah, and he's just a fucking weirdo. Yeah, but he gets to play so many facets of the character, and then also demonstrate how that character can grow and evolve over the course of these 3 seasons on the show. Like having just rewatched all of it in quick succession, like, it's amazing to me how different he plays the character in each season. Like, you can, if you saw one scene, like one fucking, like, like shot of Peter Capaldi with one line of dialogue, you would immediately be able to tell which season it was from just by how he's playing the line, like how he carries himself, how he talks. Everything like evolves because the character evolves, and
not to mention the hair.
And you block out the hair somewhere.
Yes,
somehow you install a program that makes all the hair look the exact same.
You just focus on the eyebrows.
Yes, you just focus on the eyebrows and the intonation and the way he talks. It changed so much, but this natural evolution, which is something I don't think the show had ever quite grasped. Like, every version of the Doctor evolves naturally because it has to. Like, there's no way it's not going to. Like, it would be, frankly, quite impressive if someone managed to play the role and have the role written the exact same way for, like, 3 years. You know? Like, it would be a remarkable achievement of acting that you could do that. But this is the one that felt like that just didn't happen because it has to happen. It happened because it was 100% intentional. It was designed by the writers and by the actor that this is how this character was going to be played. This is how this character was going to evolve. And that's a mode of storytelling that Doctor Who has never really quite tried to tackle. You can argue that maybe some areas of the modern Doctor Who sort of tried to do it, but never really was able to do it. Certainly wasn't able to like execute it on like a solid level, let alone like the outstanding, excellent level that Peter Capaldi and Steven Moffat and the crew and the writers managed to do with these past 3 seasons on the show. I think it's like an all-time achievement in the history of Doctor Who. It's like an utterly singular, as of now, achievement in the history of Doctor Who that creates a standard for Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker and the cast and crew coming in to hold up to, of like, this is how Doctor Who can change meaningfully going forward in like the changing media and like television landscape of how storytelling has evolved from 1963, and that they've shown you like this is how you do it. This is how you try to do the more character-based storytelling while staying true to the heart of Doctor Who and being able to do the fun week-by-week adventures that are the heart of the show. Those things don't have to clash in the way it often did, I feel, in the history of modern Doctor Who. They can dovetail and work together effectively and beautifully, and Peter Capaldi and everyone else showed us how to do that. And that's amazing to me. And it's, season 9 is an utter triumph. Heaven Sent is like the peak and pinnacle of it, and I think absolutely this era stands with the best of the history of the show.
And frankly, the history of television, because I think if you're talking about the history of television, you have to include Doctor Who.
Yes,
I will make that argument.
Yeah, and you have to include Mr. Capaldi, who is also like, and the other thing on top of it is, outside of just being a brilliant actor, he has been just the most amazing person. There's like you couldn't ask for a better human being to be like the face and sort of like ambassador for the show of Doctor Who, because that's the other role that the Doctor occupies when they're not recording the episodes, is they're going to the panels and they're giving the interviews and they're doing all of that sort of supplemental stuff to promote the show. And Peter Capaldi has had such a insane warmth and kindness and humor to him as a person that, like, even though I've never met him and I've never like been to a panel in person that he's been on, like just by watching interviews, like that's been one of my favorite things about the past 4 years as being a Doctor Who fan, is just being able to watch interviews with him and hear him talk about the show, hear him like, like have jokes and like compliment everybody he's ever worked with and be like this nice, kind, decent person that he is. And that's such an important thing to me of that being also the face of the show, that he understands how important the show is, how important the show is to the people who watch it, how important the show is as like a role model, an example for storytelling that doesn't need to like hold up a superhero that relies upon conflict and violence to resolve problems, but instead tries to find nonviolent, peaceful solutions to issues and to constantly strive to be kind. To have the person in the show giving that message and out of the show embodying that message is really powerful.
Yeah, great point. For now, let's say, Peter Capaldi, we let you go.
Yeah. Until
maybe we do a full thick of it rewatch over the summer.
Sure.
Why not?
There's so many opportunities.
Yeah, that would actually be kind of fun.
Yeah.
Anyway, that would be really irrelevant. Except, you know what? No, it's about a bunch of idiots in politics. That'd actually be really relevant. Anyway, for now, let us spend the last couple minutes of this week's podcast on the new Doctor, just as this episode spent a minute or two on the new Doctor. Not a lot we can say, as with any Doctor. We were in this position 4 years ago with all Peter Capaldi had to do was say something about his kidneys.
My kidneys! I don't like the color of your kidneys.
Yeah, it's a great scene. But we met Jodie Whittaker as the 13th Doctor. I really liked her first scene.
Yeah, I think this is the best first scene that coming in Doctor has had, because it avoids the like the awkwardness of like really, 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 really solemn to madcap is how the 10th to 11th transition went, and the 11th to 12th transition went. It's like a little bit in 9th to 10th, but that was
I actually love 10's first lines because it's 9 has this quick moment with Rose where he says goodbye, and then 10 is just like, okay, where were we? Barcelona. Yeah. I love that. But yeah,
but he has that little moment of like, new teeth. That's weird.
He's great.
That's a great little moment. But yeah, like the 10 to 11 and 11 to 12 in particular
are really
like,
jarring.
Yeah, I don't want to go. And then, blah! And it's like, and like you have to have this whole thing. And I think like, if there's anything I can criticize Steven Moffat on, I guess it is that he's not the best at writing the first scene for the incoming Doctor, because that transition has never quite worked.
It's a very hard scene.
Yeah, I like that this went kind of like the opposite. Like the madcap is not 100% how I would describe the 12th Doctor's final moments, but it's a bit more in that ballpark. It's like solemn madcap. It goes from that to like kind of full solemn of this really beautiful moment. I like that. You know, if we're saying goodbye to this TARDIS set, I like that the last moments we get with it are shot by Rachel Talalay, who had the best shots for it, and that they are really good. Like that first shot from the back of her with the music playing and the ring falling and all the smoke is beautiful.
And like us like seeing the Doctor experiencing his or her new body through their eyes for a minute, that's kind of cool. And like opening the eyes and seeing those surroundings again, just a very evocative moment.
Yeah, that's really great. And then, I think, Jodie Whittaker sells the performance immediately just by going, oh, brilliant.
No, I want to talk about that scene because it's I love that she pulls the screen up to look at herself, and she's kind of surprised at first, because you would be too.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then I love that it's surprise, grin, bigger grin, oh, brilliant. And then it becomes a goofy grin. Like she can't hold it in. Like it's just like this god. It's so the Doctor. It's this moment of like the Doctor's emotions always come through, even if he or now she tries to hide it. And it's just immediately you buy it.
Yeah.
Also, love her in 12's tattered clothes.
Yes.
It's always a fun thing. It's really good here, and I hope we get a full first hour with that.
Yes, I love that. I love the little detail also of the ring falling off her finger, because that's something from Power of the Daleks of that because the first Doctor is, I think, the only other Doctor to like regularly wear a ring as part of his costume, and so they use that as a whole thing of like Ben and Polly, our favorite companions, when they're first confronted with a mysterious man like who's claiming to be the Doctor, say like, but this is the Doctor's ring, and they'd like try to put it on Patrick Troughton's finger, as we know from the audio from the episode, and then it falls off, and so that's a nice little callback to that. It's really nice, and then I also just think it's a great sort of like the TARDIS really properly blows the fuck up at the end of this episode.
It really does feel like Chris Chibnall looked at Moffat's first scene from 8 years ago now and was like, I can do one better than that.
And she falls like out of the TARDIS and like all that. I just think like the transition is so much smoother than it has been from 10 to 11, 11 to 12. I think like it works really well. It's not quite as jarring.
Yeah, I was joking with my brother. We were watching this scene again last night, and as she's falling out of the TARDIS, I was like, I think what she's thinking here is, I need to stop regenerating in my time machine.
Yes, like maybe why am I doing that all the time? I never used to do that.
Maybe go do this in a field where like nothing will be hurt by this weird explosion of energy that gets bigger every 200 years.
I liked when the 4th Doctor regenerated into the 5th Doctor, and he was just laying in a nice field of grass.
Yes, no, it is very funny. It's like she really does look like, not again. Like, why do I keep doing this? Oh, it's a great setup for wherever Chibnall's starting of the Doctor just falling through space. It does make me very excited to see where we're going, and it gives them the opportunity to just do a full-on to be continued at the end, which is how Doctor Who, to its dying breath, needs to end.
Exactly. Like it is rewatching the beginning of the show, it is a show that is built on the cliffhanger. Like that's one of the best parts of An Unearthly Child, is the last shot is the TARDIS like in this sort of like barren landscape, and an ominous shadow walks up towards it, and the music starts playing. You need the fucking cliffhanger. Yep. It's the spirit of Doctor Who.
Yeah.
Last point to leave off with Jodie Whittaker is that I very, very much appreciate that they're just letting her use her ridiculous northern accent.
Yes, it's so great.
Yes, I like when the Doctor does not have a sort of standard British, like, received pronunciation kind of accent, or like a London-y accent, which is kind of what David Tennant had. I want weird accents. I want like Scottish accents. I want Northern accents. They're the best.
Thomas really wants an Irish doctor one day.
Yes, 100%.
Yes. Anyway, let's end it this way.
Okay.
In this moment, just thinking about it, maybe we can do a bigger episode on this. If there's sort of one thing you hope for this upcoming season with Chris Chibnall and Jodie Whittaker, like some suggestion you would have or something you want to see, what's something you would like to see Doctor Who do now that it has as clean a slate as it's ever had?
Something that I think Twice Upon a Time opens the door for, that we talked about a little bit, that like find space for smaller stories that don't need to have huge conflicts. And there happens to be a really great model for that in the history of Doctor Who. If you go back to the first Doctor, they had all this whole genre of story, which was the historical episodes, that a bunch of them, like Marco Polo, didn't really have much of a main threat. And it's like an 8-episode long serial that has an antagonist like 4 episodes in. Like, do something like that. You don't have to have a big sci-fi monster every single episode. Again, Doctor Who is a show that can do anything and execute it, and sometimes that means you don't have to do that much and you can still execute it well, and that can be more effective than trying to put everything into a big pot. So that's the direction I wanted the show to go in, like since before Doctor Who came back, in terms of like the timeline of the show.
Something I've been thinking about a lot, watching classic Who and thinking about modern Who and the best of the Capaldi era recently, I would like to see more two-parters. And I don't necessarily mean in the sense of like the original Russell T Davies model that Moffat largely kept in place until Series 9. But like they have 10 episodes to play with. I would almost like to see like, 2-part serials, like 5 of them, which was also the standard number throughout the 3rd and 4th Doctors, 5 or 6 stories. Like, there's just something, and I think especially because the new Doctor is going to have 3 companions, you have a bigger cast, they're going to have a bigger cinematic canvas they're playing with. They're shooting with anamorphic lenses, which might mean they're changing the aspect ratio of the show. Anyway, that's crazy. But like all these different changes, I would kind of like to see longer form Doctor Who stories that don't feel like they have to cram so much into one 45-minute installment. I think the basis of good Doctor Who is in the stories, and I do think the model Russell T Davies built, and something he should be absolutely commended for, has been amazingly durable in terms of how long the show has run on that basic model of the 45-minute episodes, 12 or 13 a year, this number of 2-parters, whatever. But I do think like they're extending the episode length a little bit, expanding the cast. I would like to see it all breathe. Let there be more significant guest stars again. Let the Doctor have more explorations within the stories, without the stories. That's something I would kind of like to see them go back to. Chris Chibnall is good at long-form story writing. I'd like to see him encourage that in other writers as well. It's just something that, like, if I were writing Doctor Who, that's kind of how I would go with it, because I think it's the state the show kind of wants to be in, and I actually think Series 9 is an amazing model for that. Yeah. If you look at how because they don't even have to be conventional 2-parters. It can be like The Girl Who Died and The Woman Who Lived, so stuff like that.
Or like Heaven Sent and Hellbent and Face the Raven are like this 3-parter that all basically stand on their own.
Yeah, and I think, what better way to also do this big transition with the Doctor being a woman now and opening up the casting pool because of that, than really let her linger in maybe longer, deeper Doctor Who stories. That's something I would like to see.
Yeah, I always want that from everything, is always like, in this era of ridiculously fast-paced shit, slow the fuck down. Slow the fuck down. My God, like I feel like it's a miracle that everybody in our culture doesn't have ADD just based on the fucking 2 Star Wars, or like episode 7, episode 8. Like, I love episode 8 in a lot of ways. That movie should have slowed the fuck down. Slow the fuck down. Yes. There's so much you can do with a slower paced story, and you could also then like have cool historical stories because they lend themselves to being slower paced.
Yes, indeed. But I can't wait. I really am excited. Who knows what the future will hold, but we are in the 7th year of this podcast, I'll remind you again, and Doctor Who has been the same creative team, at least behind the scenes, for the entirety of this podcast. And it's worked out great, but how exciting is it we get to embark on this new adventure and chronicle this together?
So that leads us to, I think, it's finally time, Jonathan. We need to reboot the podcast and rename it again. It's time.
No, no.
Yes,
Fuck you.
In 7 years, which is like a lot has happened. It's time for us to regenerate.
The Weekly Stuff podcast with Jonathan Lack and Sean Chapman will be back next week.
I have something to tell you, Jonathan. My name is Tim.